Emilia, where the Romans first settled in 82 BC and where the gladiators are once again back in town. Stick a flake in it, Lewis Hamilton has pole number 99 in his career. The challengers are queuing up behind him. The eventual champions won the second race of the season 4 times in the last 5 years. Who wins out today? Welcome along to the Autodromo Enzo Edino Ferrari in 2021 for the second running of the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. Ferrari and AlphaTauri based very near here. This circuit, one of 7 anti-clockwise tracks on this year's calendar. We go to Baku, Singapore, Austin, Interlagos, Jeddah and Yas Marina to finish off the season. This afternoon it's a 3.05 mile track which is wet at the moment. We've had showers before the race scheduled time. DRS zone, when it becomes available, just the one, and it's been extended this year on the run down to the Tamburello chicane, where we go now for action from last year's race. Max Verstappen and Valtteri Bottas. Bottas with debris after he ran over a piece of the Ferrari, was passed by Verstappen. Verstappen second. Schumacher against Alonso in 2005. This round the outside of Tosa at turn 7. Alonso fended off Michael Schumacher. A year later, it was the reverse. And here's Piratella from last year's race. Daniel Kvyat on his way to 4th place, almost collected Charles Leclerc. Did pick up overtake of the day for that particular move. Here are the dry tyres then. The C4, the C3 and the C2 as ever. Red is soft, medium is yellow and hard is white. But look at those wet weather and intermediate tyres. We're going to need those to start this race. Here's the grid then for the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton on pole for the first time ever at Imola. Sergio Perez for the first time ever in his career starts on the front row. Max Verstappen and the other Red Bull behind him has never finished in the top 4 in Italy. He's got Charles Leclerc for company. 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th on the grid, exactly as they were in Bahrain. Pierre Gasly's 5th, Ricciardo's 6th and Lando Norris is 7th. Valtteri Bottas, disappointing day for him yesterday, starts 8th in the second. Mercedes ahead of Esteban Ocon and Lance Stroll in 10th place. He starts 10th for the 3rd time in 4 races. Carlos Sainz is 11th for Ferrari ahead of George Russell, 12th for Williams. Sebastian Vettel 13th and Nicholas Latifi, a career best start in 14th. He's got 3 world champions around him. Vettel and then behind Alonso and Raikkonen 15th and 16th. Alonso's already been into the barrier at Tosa on his way to the grid. Antonio Giovinazzi and Mick Schumacher 17th and 18th. It's Nikita Mazepin 19th and Yuki Tsunoda, who crashed at the Variante Alta yesterday, starting 20th and completely changing his engine unit. Sebastian Vettel in the pit lane.
So listen, we're going to have to start from the pit lane. We're going to push the car to the pit lane. We're not finished in time.
Yeah, they have to have the wheels on. They have to be ready to go 5 minutes before the start. That's because you don't want equipment and people on the grid anywhere near, of course, the start of the formation lap. So they've gone into the pit lane to continue working on the car. And that buys them quite a lot of time, actually, as well. They don't have to do the formation lap, so they can go and start the race from the end of the pit lane. But, of course, it may mean he can stay out of trouble, but he'll be right at the back.
So we've been talking strategy all morning. Who's going to do what? Perez starts on a different tyre to Hamilton and Verstappen. Could Hamilton lead this race and back up the pack? It all changes now, Martin, because the rain's come down.
It does, and I hope Red Bull get off the line much better in these conditions than they did back in Istanbul last year, if you remember. Both Verstappen and Albon, the car just wouldn't pull away.
Looked like they were going backwards.
It's not as wet on this particular grid, and you know, it's bizarre, isn't it? Because you really would think about, if it wasn't going to rain anymore and the track was like that all the way around, you'd be on dry tyres. There's no doubt about it.
But from what I've seen, it is not like that all the way round. The start finished straight, and Rivazza got the best of the rain, as it were, i.e. really, really light rain. Towards Villeneuve, Tamburello and Tosa especially, it absolutely chucked it down.
Who's got full wets then? Pierre Gasly is on the full wet, so Mick Schumacher, Nikita Mazepin at the back, and Esteban Ocon for Alpine are on the full wet tyre, the blue mark tyre. Everybody else on the intermediate tyre.
So We're underway for the formation lap, and we'll get to see now, and we can already see from the helicopter shot, just how much spray is going to hang around in the air. The temperature under 10 degrees at the moment. It's about 9.5 degrees air temperature. The track's not going to dry out very quickly because it is very cold indeed. And through Tamburello we go then on the formation lap, and yeah, we could just about see Sergio Perez in the background and Max Verstappen because the spray is coming up from the back of Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes. Two Red Bulls chasing down one Mercedes right at the front. It's kind of role reversal to what we've seen in recent races.
I think, though, Crofty, it's going to be about survival the first handful of laps as they just find out where the grip is and the level of the grip. Where are you going to hit the brake pedal? When you turn the steering wheel, is it going to bite and go into the apex of the corner? It's the braking's the key thing. Remember, they start the race with 110 kilograms of fuel as well. So it's like having a very, very big passenger on board. Yeah. That also hindered.
Oh, there's
Ferrari's
the Ferrari.
round.
There's the Ferrari at Aqua Minerale of Charles Leclerc spinning around and luckily not going into the gravel on the formation lap.
Yeah, so what he's got to do is regain his position, which is actually, yes, he's got to regain his position before the first safety car line. Otherwise, he's got to go in the pit lane as well. That's on the intermediate tyres. So he hasn't really lost too many places there, has he? He hasn't dropped to the back. If he drops to the back, he's obliged to stay there. And there he goes.
He's going to overtake Gasly now.
He can do that now. So all clear then for Charles Leclerc.
He's not the only one, and he's in very good company in terms of spinning behind a safety car on a formation lap here at Imola. Alain Prost did it in 1991. Gerhard Berger, I think, also did it as well. So we've seen that happen before, and Charles Leclerc, after a magnificent qualifying yesterday to put his Ferrari fourth on the grid, spinning out through Aqua Minerale. It's treacherous out there.
He's not going to have much confidence on the first lap, is he?
Not at all. 605 metres from pole position down to the first braking zone. It's a very long run to sort yourselves out, to try and make up a few places. A track that is traditionally very difficult to overtake on. Some will fancy their chances in these conditions.
Yeah, so let's keep an eye on Pierre Gasly then in 5th place on the full wet tyre. Won't do him a lot of good on this part of the track.
Can I have a BBW fail?
A brake-by-wire fail for Sebastian Vettel and his Aston Martin.
Surely, as I was saying on the grid, you know, to burn your rear brakes out on a going to the grid means you've probably got a fundamental issue anyway.
Cake tins that the shrouding around these rear brakes absolutely destroyed on Vettel and Lance Stroll's car. We have 19 on the grid then, one in the pit lane. It's lights out and away we go. Verstappen gets an excellent reaction. Hamilton, though, is ahead of Perez, but not for long, as Max Verstappen now on the inside joins Hamilton in battle. It is Hamilton and Verstappen. Verstappen and Hamilton wheel to wheel going into the field of the Tamburello chicane. Hamilton is forced wide and he's lost a little bit of bodywork as well. Sergio Perez is in third place at the moment, looking to make it into second. The rest covered in a blanket of spray. Verstappen leads the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix from Lewis Hamilton. The two championship protagonists came together at the first braking point.
That was absolutely exceptional driving there. Verstappen, the Red Bulls did get off the line, but Lewis tried to brave it out around the outside and ran out of road in these conditions, and Max is entitled to take the line.
I don't know if I've got damage. He pushed me right wide in turn one.
This time last year, it was his teammate Valtteri Bottas who ran over debris and picked up damage. Hamilton has got bodywork damage on his Mercedes. As we're looking now at car number 55, Carlos Sainz, 8th place at the moment. He's made up 3 places at the start of this race, and he, like his teammate Charles Leclerc, goes wide at Aqua Minerale, and that's a spinning Williams of Nicholas Latifi going out at Aqua Minerale. Well done, he's kept the engine running, and he's not got beached in the gravel. Verstappen leads Hamilton, leads Leclerc going over the grass now. Is his teammate Sainz. Perez is 4th, Ricciardo 5th, then Gasly, Sainz, Stroll, Norris and Bottas.
Yeah, the Ferrari's really struggling to fire the tyres up, aren't they? So Gasly...
Oh, and that is Nicholas Latifi in the Williams, and he is out. As you can see, going into the barrier, And that is a pretty hefty shunt into the wall.
So he's applied the throttle coming out of Acqua Minerale, climbing the hill towards the high chicane, the Variante Alta, and obviously lit the rear axle up.
So we saw Latifi going off. Oh, he's made contact there.
Oh, that was a big impact, wasn't it?
Contact it was actually with Mazepin. So they were trying to go wheel to wheel. It's a narrow track. There's not much room out there, and there was no room whatsoever for Nicholas Latifi. Esteban Ocon's got problems. He's tumbling down the order, and into the pits he comes for an early stop for Esteban Ocon. I wonder if that's to put the intermediate tyres on. He was on the wet weather tyres.
He started on the wets. Ted, what can you tell us?
Yeah, it is. Amazingly, I would have said that a wet tyre start for Gasly and Ocon was actually a good call, but Ocon says it's not wet enough for the full wet. So under the safety car, losing a bit less time, although he'll rejoin right at the back of the pack. He's gone on to the Inters.
And of course, now we've had wet conditions, they're no longer obliged to use two different types of dry tyre. So when it dries out, if they can get to the end on a set of dry tyres, they're not obliged to run two types.
That doesn't feel great.
It looks like we've got damage to front wing end plate there, Lewis, but we'll keep you updated on the balance shift.
Yeah,
front left end plate, I'm told.
Yeah, we saw that piece flicking off, didn't we? And, well, I must say that the safety procedures and tests and were extraordinary there for Williams, weren't they? I mean, that car had a very, very high impact.
So watch Verstappen here. Great reaction, was already pointing towards his teammate Sergio Perez, and then a gap opened up for him on the left-hand side of Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes, and we now head into the Tamburello chicane, and 2 into 1 doesn't often go, and it didn't.
Yeah, I mean, in those conditions, I can't imagine that the stewards are going to be wanting to look at that with Verstappen. Oh yeah, I mean, that was just the perfect leaving the supermarket start, wasn't it? Hardly any revs and just coasted away. And then having to brake so early because nobody knows how much grip there is. Yeah, he took the racing line, and I do not believe that will be looked at, need to be looked at by the stewards.
Well, Hamilton either had to back off or stay there and risk picking up some damage.
And the floor will be damaged as well because he's gone over the extra yellow curbs there.
And I think you can see the end plate just dangling a bit, and eventually, with 3 or 4 thuds of the floor, it comes off. Oh. Yeah. Hangs on.
And that's a critical part for controlling the airflow down the side of the car and affects the rest of the car's balance as well. So that's not a one. None of the pieces are good to lose, but especially that bit.
So that was Perez getting out of shape, and this is how Charles Leclerc managed to get past the other Red Bull at the Variante Alta. Leclerc then, after his misadventures on the formation lap, up to 3rd place. Nicholas Latifi going off where Leclerc went off on the formation lap, rejoins, and in a few hundred meters time, out of the race. You can see Stroll going past, Vettel going past in the Aston Martin. Oh, and that was Nikita Mazepin giving him a tap, or him colliding into Mazepin.
Now we're going to see the other point of view. Right, that's not Mazepin's fault. That's the car recovering back onto the track, and obviously Nicholas Latifi not realising somebody was around him. You can't see a whole lot in your mirrors when there's that much spray.
No.
But that was not Mazepin's fault.
Well, he had nowhere to go.
No.
If it had gone any further right to stay out of the way of the Williams, he's on the grass himself.
Yeah.
So, incident-packed opening to this race.
Another weather update, Max. We're expecting these conditions for the next 10 minutes.
Max Verstappen leads from Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc in the top 3. We're behind the safety car, which is the Mercedes GTR for this weekend. The Aston Martin will be back for the next race.
Red Bull did not need Leclerc to be passing Perez, did they? No. If they want to do the big pincer movement on Hamilton, but Bottas dropping it down to 10th place. George Russell just outside the points in 11th at the moment. So Danny Ricciardo had a decent start. He's up to 5th. But yeah, it really is. It was 2
We have Maureen in the pit lane now. Maureen.
Gasly being told that it's now starting to rain a bit heavier in the pit lane. In the wet conditions, Hamilton's not going to be as disadvantaged by the damage that he's picked up to that front wing. But when it dries, that's when he's going to start to lose aero performance. Is that as in comes Sebastian Vettel in the Aston Martin. Oh, and that is Mick Schumacher at the exit of the pit lane. Schumacher is also in a bit of bother and a bit of difficulty. He's kept the engine running. He's now got the whole of the lap to get back to the pits, where they'll be waiting for him with a new front wing. But Mick Schumacher, as we saw Sebastian Vettel coming in for a pit stop to change tyres, well, Schumacher's got to come in now to get a new front wing.
So he started on the full wets, so that wasn't at the end, that wasn't exiting the pits, was it? Has Schumacher pitted?
No.
No, we're going to see the replay now, but so I think he's pit lane end, so they obviously got some debris at the pit exit, is why they've closed the pit entry, stop people coming down there, and they can change the whole nose. Takes them normally 12, 15 seconds. They've got to, normally you jack the car up, of course, on the nose.
I say he was warming his tyres up.
Oh dear.
And lost it. Wow. That front wing might just have been made in Italy, but that's not really what the sponsors would have wanted to see heading towards their holding.
He was giving that plenty of lateral movement, wasn't he, young Mick there? What are you seeing, Ant?
Yeah, listening in on a few drivers, and they're all complaining that the safety car's going too slowly. They're losing tyre temperature all the time. Another thing I picked up is that Max Verstappen's incredible start might have been the fact that he started in second gear. So, yeah, really, really good traction for him off the line.
Well, we've seen that before as well, haven't we? With cars starting in second gear on the intermediate tyres. And it was a good reaction and a very good getaway from Verstappen. So, there's Nicholas Latifi's Williams finally getting taken away as Mick Schumacher continues on his way to try and get back to the pits. Actually, we haven't been to the pits so far in this race. Ted Kravitz, good afternoon.
Oh, well, we have sort of, but yeah, there's been lots going on, Crofty. I've got to tell you, actually, how well Charles Leclerc's done to recover from that, and also Daniel Ricciardo. It's worth noticing that Lando Norris, did we see who he came together with? No. He definitely did come together with somebody else and he took quite a hard hit in his McLaren, complained to his team. They were actually ready in the pit box to receive poor Lando, but didn't come in, stayed out. So let's see if we can see if there's any damage to that McLaren. Of
Ted,
course, the Haas can't pit. The Haas can't pit because the pit lane is closed.
That's just what I was going to say.
Yeah, well, don't worry, I'm here watching it live, mate.
Thank you, sir.
So he's got to go around for another lap. Poor Mick Schumacher. Character building, you might say. Both Haas drivers slightly in the wars. But yeah, hopefully someone's going to retrieve that stray front wing, made, as you say, in Italy at the Dallara concern, not too far from here. But yeah, so while it's not good for McLaren in one count, Lando Norris down to 9th. Not bad. Daniel Ricciardo holding his own behind the safety car in 5th.
I think it is spitting with rain as well.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of moisture up from the helicam, Ted. What's it like in the pits?
Easing up.
Is there anything that could fall under the car or something?
Just watch. There's just some stuff dangling from the nose, nothing massive, but no need to push, no need to go fast or anything.
Carry on, Ted.
Yeah, it's easing up. So this was all about, if you're watching our pre-show, this was all about this huge load of rain that was going from the northeast of Italy around sort of Venice and moving down towards over the country into the southwest, you know, towards sort of the Mediterranean, if you want to take a really big picture of it. And part of it went low enough to hit us here in Imola. They didn't think it would. The forecast was for it to miss the circuit, but indeed it did. So, but it's easing up now.
Excellent, thank you, Ted. Perez, I wonder why he was trying to overtake a couple of cars.
Yeah, but he's gone off. I don't know why he thought he could then pass cars under safety car conditions. He then recovered his position, but he'd lost position out on track. So I would have thought that's against the regulations.
You're normally only allowed to overtake a car behind the safety car if that car in front has an issue, and an issue that is very obvious, and it would be dangerous for you behind him to stay behind him for much longer.
So another go now.
Okay, but let's. We're still okay. We haven't lost anything. Just a couple of track positions. So, everything's going to be okay. We're going to put the car back together.
Yeah, just got to be a little bit patient, but the accident that caused the pit lane to be closed, because there's debris at the exit, was caused by Mick Schumacher. But the pit lane is now open, so he can come in, and the safety car period will be ending at the end of this lap. So he will arrive, Martin, at the end of this lap on much warmer tyres than everybody else, because he can play catch-up a little bit.
Yeah, well, that's if he catches them at all. Let's see how far they've got to go. They're only up at the Tozer at the moment, so they'll take a while. Say, normally you jack the car up, of course, using the nose and front wing. That's not there, so they put a side jack in to get the chassis up in the air. Now they're struggling to get the nose box off. The controls you saw there, the pipes, I think would be pitot tubes and such like. Nothing too critical there, because they'll just be replaced with the new nose.
So, end of this lap, we're going to lose the safety car. We have already lost from this race Nicholas Latifi. We've seen Mick Schumacher hit the wall. We've seen Max Verstappen take the lead off the line from Lewis Hamilton. We've seen Charles Leclerc pass Sergio Perez for third place. Perez is fourth, Ricciardo fifth, Gasly sixth. Lance Stroll runs seventh ahead of Carlos Sainz, who's eighth. Lando Norris had contact with Lance Stroll. That's why he lost places right at the start. Valtteri Bottas is down to 10th, just ahead of the man he was teammates with at Mercedes for the Sakir Grand Prix. George Russell, Kimi Raikkonen runs 12th ahead of his teammate Antonio Giovinazzi. Then it comes Yuki Tsunoda, who's made places up from the back of the grid. Fernando Alonso, Nikita Mazepin, Esteban Ocon, Sebastian Vettel and Mick Schumacher.
So now it's Max's job to control the pack, let the safety car get far enough away before he lets the car go, and there he is, he's off.
So Verstappen, Hamilton, Leclerc, Perez, Ricciardo. We're racing again here at Imola, and it's a decent start for Max Verstappen, but Hamilton is right on his tail, and I wonder, is Hamilton going to have a little go if he can into the chicane? They came together on the opening lap. This time around, Hamilton is just a little too far back to make the move on Verstappen. He slots there into second place. There's Daniel Ricciardo in fifth, with Pierre Gasly behind him in sixth, Lance Stroll in seventh, and then comes Carlos Sainz, eighth for Ferrari at the moment. Out in front, though, Verstappen has survived the safety car restart.
And Leclerc looking racy, considering how many dramas he's had. That's absolutely amazing. Having a look up the inside of Lewis Hamilton there. And I do think that front wing damage of Hamilton's will impact even in the wet conditions in terms of his balance and his downforce.
Carlos Sainz is up to seventh in the other Ferrari. He's just overtaken Lance Stroll, who's dropped down into eighth place, and Carlos Sainz is not done yet with the overtaking. He's moved up 2 places on this lap and now sits in sixth after getting past Pierre Gasly. Hamilton's struggling, isn't he?
Yeah, Lewis had a moment, ran wide there, and that's put Leclerc right on his back again. So Lewis running just a bit wide on the exit of Aqua Minerale, having to tiptoe through that next phase.
Gasly's back ahead of Sainz. Great duel going on between the Ferrari and the Alpha Tauri. Sainz is now back ahead of Gasly again. They're swapping places on this rain-soaked track here in Imola this afternoon. But out in front, Max Verstappen is putting clear daylight between himself and Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton under pressure from Charles Leclerc behind him. And we get now to the long straight down towards the Tamburello chicane. How much straight line speed has that Ferrari got of Charles Leclerc? Can he get any closer to Lewis Hamilton? Verstappen then leads as Norris gets ahead of Stroll, and behind, well, no speed there for the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz. He's trying to get past Pierre Gasly. That's not going to happen. Getting in on the act is the McLaren of Lando Norris. Gasly first into the chicane ahead of Norris. Then comes Carlos Sainz. Then comes the Aston Martin of Lance Stroll. And then comes Valtteri Bottas in the Mercedes.
And Stroll, we know, very, very quick in wet conditions. We remember back from Monza qualifying, of course, in the past. Generally, Lance knows how to drive a Formula One car in the rain. So the incident involving Verstappen and Hamilton on the very beginning of the race has been noted, according to the stewards.
Doesn't mean they're going to investigate. They just have noted it. Right, let's ride on board with Lando Norris then. Down the straight, see the Aston Martin. He's got past at the beginning of the straight there, and it's a good job they've got the old rain lights going, as Lando Norris can see which way he needs to go, and he was very close, wasn't he, to the pit wall there as he got past 2 cars down that straight. But then they'll start to come back at him again, and as it stands, Lando Norris in 8th place.
Gasly, of course, still on the full wet tyre at this stage. And yeah, that was very brave driving 3 abreast down the pit straight, because the pit straight is anything but straight.
Absolutely. Kinks round, it's an official corner, turn 19 to the right-hand side. Yuki Tsunoda is ahead of Fernando Alonso, by the way. He's made up 6 places in this race so far, one of which, of course, was helped by Nicholas Latifi crashing out. Valtteri Bottas struggling for grip. George Russell right behind him. We're looking now at Daniel Ricciardo, and there's Ricciardo's teammate, Lando Norris. And Norris and Gasly really going for it here. Norris is up to 6th place. Gasly will try and fight that back, but I don't think he's going to manage it in the braking zone. No, he's not. So McLaren running 5th and 6th as Norris makes his way back up through the field after that early contact with Lance Stroll. Yeah, Sainz passed Gasly, as you pointed out, but he's now dropped a couple of places in the skirmish on the previous lap. I think skirmish is a very good word for it on an afternoon like this. That's the skirmish between Norris and Gasly. Straight line speed advantage, I think, there for the McLaren, who've looked very, very good in a straight line through the first sector all weekend long. Right, that's the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz and the AlphaTauri of Pierre Gasly, and that's Sainz then up into 7th place now. He's starting to get a few more places back through Piratella and down towards Acqua Minerale. Yeah, and Gasly's tyre choice is not now looking right, is it? No. That's why Ocon ditched those quite early, but the 2 Alpines running down in 15th and 16th right now, Alonso and Ocon. The trouble is, he can't come in for intermediates because he's just going to lose a heap of time, and the intermediates might then only last for 5 or 6 laps before it gets dry, and he's just going to have to put up with that for a while.
The steering wheel is moving by itself.
Yeah, copy Checo, we're looking into it, we can see it.
So has he made contact with a curb? Is that displaced it a bit, I wonder? No, it sounds like a power steering issue. It sounds like it's driving some energy back towards him, but look at the lead Verstappen has now, 5.3 seconds, and flying along very nicely. As is Lance Stroll. Those wet tyres on the AlphaTauri of Pierre Gasly not helping him as Stroll takes the long way round and over the curbs at the chicane, and it was a move that was on, but very, very difficult to slow the car down enough to keep on the tarmac. He'll fight that again next time around. No investigation necessary between Verstappen and Hamilton for that first corner incident. Yeah, that's just what I was going to point out. The stewards agreeing with that, but there's nothing to be done there, especially in those conditions. There was minor contact.
Okay, we have a bit more rain now, a bit more rain coming now.
That's exactly what Pierre Gasly wants to hear. On the wet tyre, he could do with it being a little bit wetter out there, whilst the others on the intermediates would like this to dry up a bit more, I'm sure. Hamilton has no answer at the moment, Martin, to the pace of Max Verstappen as Stroll goes wide and loses a couple of places, to 1 place in the process through Acqua Minerale. Yeah, Hamilton fastest on the previous lap, though, so it's holding it at 5 seconds. Tyre temperatures and therefore pressures just beginning to come up again for the drivers after the safety car period. Ooh, Carlos Sainz, where were you going? How much time has he lost there? He looks, well, he hasn't lost any positions. He's still ahead of Gasly on the driver tracker. Just through Rivazza, running wide and onto the gravel, but managing to keep going. It really is so difficult for the drivers out there at the moment. Gasly's got quite a queue behind him now on those wet tyres. Yeah, he's got a queue behind him of about 6 cars at the moment, all very close. Let's have a look at Rivazza 1, down the hill, stop. Oh no, gravel's coming up. Nice view, I'm sure, for the people on their balconies on this Sunday afternoon of the houses there, but not exactly pleasant going for Carlos Sainz. And this was the move of Lance Stroll on Pierre Gasly. Well, second time around, he went even wider. First time around, he just went onto the rumble strips, and second time around went even wider, but managed to get ahead as Lando Norris now gets ahead of his teammate Daniel Ricciardo, and Ricciardo gets back ahead of him. The 2 McLarens going for it up towards Variante Alta. And Perez is under investigation for overtaking behind the safety car. That is a slam dunk penalty, I'm afraid. Now the fastest lap for Lewis Hamilton. The gap now 4.7, 4.6 seconds. He's starting to find some pace. Here's Ted.
Yeah, that's been noted on the Red Bull pit wall. I don't know if they could have mitigated that by, they know the rules, don't know if they could have mitigated that by telling Checo not to give those places back under the safety car. He had the opportunity, but he didn't do that. Anyway, just a quick one, looking down to AlphaTauri. No sign that they're going to bring Gasly in for a pit stop. It's stopped raining now. I don't know what they're waiting for. They won't be able to go from full wets to slick, so they're going to have to put the inters on at some point. So we'll see what they do. Just asking Mercedes, what's up with Valtteri Bottas? Just stuck behind, it seems, Gasly now. Maybe he can move past him now and get up ahead, because there is latent pace in that Mercedes. Here we go.
Gasly is costing them 8 seconds per lap, that massive queue behind him now. More or less the rest of the field, as Perez does take a 10-second penalty.
Yeah, there's confirmation. A stop-go penalty, a 10-second time penalty is being applied to Sergio Perez for overtaking while the safety car is deployed.
Well, it's 28 seconds, well, 24 to drive down the pit lane, and he's got to do a 10-second stop as well. That's 35 seconds it's going to cost him. There we go. So he's gone off, look. He misses, 2 cars overtake him. Gasly goes through as well, and then he just whistles straight back past them.
Yeah, can't do that.
You can't do that. So, and you can't work on the car when you come into the pits either. It's not something you can take when you do the pit stop. He's got to come in and take that penalty.
So it's confirmation, because the original graphic said stop go. It's a 10-second time penalty. So he can stop for 10 seconds, then they can work on the car. It's not the stop go. No, they couldn't. You're absolutely right.
Stop go, didn't it?
It did, yeah, but and I think that might have been wrong. They then changed it. Either way, when Perez comes in, if he loses, Martin, the amount of time you said, which he will, he'll come out just behind Fernando Alonso. And Alonso really struggling at the moment. He's down in 17th at the moment in that Alpine.
Yeah, it's a dramatically different penalty if it's not a stop-go.
George Russell up into the points in the Williams. He's managed to get past Pierre Gasly now. Remember, Russell was running 10th here last year for Williams as well. Well, he's running 10th at the moment in these tricky conditions on lap 13 of this Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. Now Giovinazzi fancies getting past, if he can, the AlphaTauri. No, nothing doing at this moment.
Yeah, AlphaTauri dreaming of a little bit more rain, and they've talked themselves into really hanging on to the wrong tyre here.
Giovinazzi on the inside at Tosa makes the move, and now Yuki Tsunoda, who started last in this race, is now alongside his teammate as well. You'd think that AlphaTauri would know the weather in this part of Italy better than anyone else. Their factory at Faenza just 10 miles down the road. And on the road at the moment, Tsunoda past Gasly. Ocon's looking for a way past as well. He's going to have to sit tight for a moment. Whilst out in front, the gap now 4.2 seconds between Verstappen and Hamilton.
Well, there's the difference, Croft, isn't it? Ocon recognised the tyres are wrong, so they pitted him under the safety car. He's now back up with Gasly.
And Ocon and Vettel, who came together in Bahrain, if you remember, gets close, but not too close this time into the Variante Alta, and Vettel manages to get past and up into to 15th place. Out in front, are we seeing Max just backing off a little bit at the moment, or have Mercedes and Hamilton found a way to deal with the damage? Is there anything they can do to help their pace?
What they want to do, of course, is keep these intermediate tyres alive until the track's ready for slick tyres. So I'd imagine Max is pacing himself a bit, and Lewis wants to come back and put him under pressure, and he's beginning to show signs of that.
Yeah, you know, I said that Fernando Alonso was struggling. I think his teammate Esteban Ocon struggling a touch at the moment as well. Into the chicane we go. Ocon just ahead of Fernando Alonso. And Alonso starting to gain on his teammate. I suppose it's all as well, Martin, about trying to get as much temperature into the tyres as you possibly can. You might have been struggling at the start, but now we've had a few racing laps. That really helps matters.
Yeah, and then, of course, managing it down. And I don't think it'll be too long before we see them perhaps wandering off the racing line down the straights, trying to cool these inters. We'll go through that phase soon, but Verstappen just popped in a 1 minute 27.7.
Now, Carlos Sainz, who has had huge adventures so far.
How many mistakes I'm going to do? You are too quick, guy. Calm down.
See, I was being generous. I said adventures, not mistakes, but there's another adventure, in inverted commas, at Tosa, and we're watching now Antonio Giovinazzi, very same corner, a couple of lap and a half ago, getting past Pierre Gasly.
Yeah, it looks like Carlos needs a bit of rear brake bias tuned in, doesn't it? He keeps locking the front as he did down into Rivazza as well.
At the moment, Carlos Sainz is some half a minute behind his teammate Charles Leclerc. And Leclerc, who just has this knack of picking up good results when it's not necessarily a given that Ferrari are challenging for a podium, is up there in the podium places at the moment. As into the pits comes Pierre Gasly, who will not want to see this set of wet tyres ever again in his life.
It's that feature I used to do. You must be on the right tyres at the right time. And sadly, he wasn't, and they just didn't want to buy into that decision, did they?
No.
But hindsight's a wonderful thing.
As the Haas getting lapped at the rear of the field there, Nikita Mazepin, both he and his teammate Michael Schumacher have been lapped, and that McLaren battle, Ricciardo and Norris, I think that's going to go on all race long.
Just keep an eye on if people start to pit for slicks with sector times.
Yeah, we're looking at that, Max. You just focus on the race ahead at the moment.
I think they might have been looking at that even before the message.
Yeah, I think Max's point there is, look, it feels to me like it's starting to get ready for slick tyres, but you could fly off the road so quickly if you make that decision a lap or two too early. And it's a two-horse race out front, isn't it? They're dropping Leclerc and Perez, who's carrying a penalty. And it does appear to be a 10-second penalty to add it on to his pit stop and not a stop and go. And then, as you say, the two McLarens squabbling over 5th and 6th.
Right, Ted, to you.
No sign of any sort of dry lines being burnt onto the pit straight that I can see, guys. I wonder if Pierre Gasly knows the Italian for why did you wait so long,
I have a lot more pace in me. I can't use it at the moment. I need clean air.
Well, also because the tyres are still getting up to temperature, believe it or not. I've had a word from Mercedes that only now, just now, Valtteri Bottas's tyres starting to work on that Merc, so he's starting to up his pace. I got a report also from them about Lewis Hamilton and the balance of his car, whether he's lost front downforce. Actually, he says the balance is not too bad. That front end plate, foot plate, as they call it, looks very nice. Works, gives him a little bit of downforce, but if you knock it off, it doesn't matter so much. So he's all good.
Was that the latest in the long line of driver messages that essentially, Martin, I'd like to get past my teammate, please. Would you mind telling him to move over?
Yeah, that's very much exactly what he was saying. This is holding me up now.
So is it the right thing to do for Daniel Ricciardo to move over and let Lando Norris pass?
Daniel, we want to swap positions. We need to see Lando's pace in clear air. We need to see Lando's pace in clear air.
That's going to go down well.
Yeah, about as well as a shrimp shortage on barbecue afternoon back in Perth.
Yeah, I'd imagine Daniel might not speak English there for a little while.
Sorry, radio's playing up.
No, there he goes, letting him through on the way up to Piratella. So good team play, and now Lando needs to show what he can do, and I'm sure if he doesn't scamper off into the distance, they'll swap them back again.
Well, just looking at the times, there's about 7.5 seconds, no, 6.5 seconds now with that move between the two McLarens and Carlos Sainz. They can afford to do this for a few laps, and it shouldn't affect Daniel Ricciardo's race if, at the end of it, if Lando Norris can't get any closer to those out in front, they decide to swap them back again, which would surely be the right thing to do if McLaren are just holding station.
Max, could I have an update on conditions, please?
Yeah, it's getting a little bit drier, but also still drizzling, so it's tricky.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah, and if you can't, you know, the trouble is, when you can see, and there's Lewis beginning to cool his tyres a little bit, the right-hand side tyres, the problem is, on slicks, you can be on that sort of darker zone that's a bit drier, but as soon as you slide a little bit wide, you're in double trouble. Then the track is obviously much wetter and you'll be straight in the head.
Well, that marvellous performance when Lewis Hamilton won his 7th world title in Turkey last year, he kept his car on the driest part of the track longer than anyone else. Yeah. That was the secret to that win, wasn't it?
Yes, and of course...
I start to slide more over the rubber sector 1.
Max is sounding a bit fraught, isn't he?
Yeah, more fraught than you'd expect for a man who's 5.5 seconds out in front. But then when you're out in front, you start to think of reasons why you might not be in front. Don't forget, Max Verstappen, in a great position last year, had that tyre failure when he was in second place. Max Verstappen, who's never finished to the top 3 in Italy, and last year had 3 races in Italy, all of which he failed to finish in. If there's ever going to be a scenario where Max Verstappen starts to think the worst, possibly this afternoon would be high on that list.
Absolutely. Now, in a few more laps' time, the window would be open for Verstappen and Hamilton to make a pit stop and still come out clear of Charles Leclerc. He's now 21.7 seconds adrift of the leader, as you can see, 16.8 adrift of Lewis Hamilton. But they're beginning to get to a window where if they do want to put dry tyres on, but that would be a very, very bold decision right now.
Max saying that he's losing, he's starting to slide.
So Lando, we don't want to be the first car onto dries. We want to eke out this into tyre.
So push, but don't push too hard that you have to come in a couple of laps too early. So Verstappen saying he's starting to slide in the first sector a little bit. That's being borne out in the timing screens at the moment. Max was 6/10 slower in that first sector on the last lap.
Sliding on the rubber, he said, the rubber that's been put down through the weekend. So Lando's pulled out a 4-second gap over his teammate.
Yeah, again, track is drying a bit, but not enough for the moment.
Understood, Max.
And but what the team is saying to him is, look, fine, but don't burn. We need to get further into the race before you burn these inters up.
And what should be a one-stop race, but where, of course, now they don't have to run 2 types of the dry compound because they've run the intermediates, or in Pierre Gasly's case, the wet weather tyres at the start of this race, and Gasly down in 18th place after what was the wrong decision to run the wet weather tyres. We've lost Nicholas Latifi from this race. 19 are still running. Verstappen leads by 5 seconds from Hamilton, who's carrying damage to the left-hand side of his front wing after the 2 tangled in the opening corner.
Extraordinary, really, isn't it? When you consider how many cars went off on the formation, going to the grid, caught fire, been in through the gravel trap, we've actually only lost the 1 car.
So tyres are quite hot.
So see if you can drive offline to find any damp patches, keep those temps down.
Yes, plenty going off into the gravel traps and having a few adventures. They'll be celebrating like it's their birthday today. Talking of which, happy birthday, Anthony Davidson.
I thought you were going to get that in at some point. Thank you very much. Look, they're all struggling for the tyres going off. You can see that dry line appearing more and more. But they don't want to be that guinea pig to come in. They don't want to be the first one to make the switch onto the slicks. They'll wait for someone else to do it, thank you very much. And that's what the message to Lando Norris was all about. You've got further down the field, Valtteri Bottas stuck behind Stroll. And even Toto came onto the radio to say, come on, Valtteri. So I think they're getting a bit desperate down there.
Well, Lance Stroll, as he showed in the opening stages of the Turkish Grand Prix last year, is a decent competitor in the wet. Certainly in his Euro Formula 3 days, had a very good weekend at Spa that I remember in the wet as well. Took pole position in Turkey, led the race, and then picked up damage to his front wing, which cost him dear last time out. Well, he's costing Valtteri Bottas quite a bit today. Bottas can't get past the Aston Martin. He's in 9th and Stroll's in 8th. Sergio Perez has just set the fastest lap. He needs a lot of them because he's got a 10-second stop-go penalty for overtaking behind the safety car coming up when he does come into the pits. And standing over the pits is Ted Kravitz.
I just wonder if a couple of world champions fancy an early switch to slicks. How about, do we fancy that, a Ferrari? How about Sebastian Vettel and Fernando Alonso?
What have they got to lose? 6
world championships between them, and 14th Vettel and 16th Alonso. So I do see, yes, it is. It's the slicks at Aston Martin. No action for Alonso at Alpine.
It's
so
Vettel
far,
coming in.
and it is Vettel. I thought so. Good old Sebi. We think alike, don't we? A nice early, got nothing to lose. It's the yellow medium tyres. The rear brakes seem okay. It does seem to be that it was not. It was indeed some sort of global, if you like, team-wide brake-by-wire failure that caused this. But I'm still waiting for confirmation on what all that chaos was all about from Aston Martin before the race started.
Thank you very much.
They might as well roll this dice as long as it stays on the road. It's a no-brainer, isn't it, for them to try to regain?
Oh, now, it's a no-brainer to gain some data that may or may not help Sebastian Vettel, but this isn't going to help Sebastian Vettel because he has got a 10-second stop-go penalty. This is an even more severe penalty than the one that's going to affect Sergio Perez. With 5 minutes to go before the start of the race, the wheels need to be fitted. They weren't, and that's why he's got a stop-go penalty. So he'll come in, Martin, stop for 10 seconds, and then go out again. But he doesn't stop in his pit box. They can't do any work on his pit box, on his car.
Well, we saw them push it off the grid, didn't we? So they'd obviously still breached that regulation. And Valtteri Bottas is now 70 seconds off the lead. He's having an awful weekend, isn't he?
Yeah.
This is costing him dearly as well. He'll, you know, with it being 88 seconds for a lap, he's not that far away from being lapped.
He certainly isn't, and he's a bit closer to Lance Stroll on this particular lap, which might fill him with a touch more joy. How carefully they're taking Toza. And from this view on board with Valtteri Bottas, you can see just how steep this climb is over the ridge and towards Piratella at the top of the hill. Aston Martin ahead of the Mercedes. Bottas desperate to get past.
Yeah, so it's stuck as a stop-go penalty for Sebastian Vettel, but that came from back in the 70s, wasn't it? Where there was a crash, where a mechanic jumped back out to fire up a car, and we had an awful crash on the start line. It'll come to me eventually who that was and where it was, but I think Spa, and yeah, and it's about not having people and equipment anywhere near the start of the race. That's why they keep that 5-minute gap there, and that is what Aston Martin have fallen foul of, trying to fix the rear brakes.
Exactly. The job had to be done, but they need to do it quicker to escape any attention from the stewards. Thank you very much to Mark Hughes, who says Zolder 1981. Dave Luckett was the Arrows mechanic.
Yeah, that was an awful. I remember sitting home watching that. It was awful.
Not good, and we don't want to see that ever again. So, out in front, Verstappen from Hamilton, Leclerc from Perez, Norris from Ricciardo, and Norris has put 8 seconds between himself and his teammate Daniel Ricciardo. Then comes Carlos Sainz, just 2.5 seconds behind the McLaren, and then this battle for 8th and 9th at the moment, Stroll ahead of Valtteri Bottas. What about the other Aston Martin? Sebastian Vettel has put slick tyres on. Looking at his sector times, Martin, you'd rather get the feeling it's still a bit too slippy out there at the moment for slicks.
Yeah, he's a couple of seconds off in the first and middle sectors as well, so slicks doesn't look like the right decision at the moment.
No, and I think he might have come in anyway to the pits because he's got that stop-go penalty that he must take within 2 or 3 laps. Here he goes for his penalty for not having his tyres fitted at the wheels fitted at the 5-minute signal.
Yeah, you do your penalty. You deliver the penalty in your own pit area, but you're not allowed to work on the car. And then, of course, the time it's taken him, it's 24 seconds to just drive down the pit lane lost. So it's a good 34 seconds he's lost there.
And Vettel will come out behind his teammate and a lap down from his teammate, who's still got Valtteri Bottas very much on his tail. And then there's George Russell still running in the points as well, and has just edged clear somewhat of Kimi Raikkonen in the last few laps as well. Grip is coming back, says Lewis Hamilton. The reason he's saying that is the gap that was 5 seconds is now down to 3.2 seconds after that last lap.
And remember back in Istanbul how Lewis ended up with slicks at the end of the race, didn't he? He'd taken all the tread off the intermediates and was getting along very nicely indeed.
And it's now 2.5 seconds, Lewis Hamilton to Max Verstappen. There is Max Verstappen getting his way past the Aston Martin of Sebastian Vettel. And now Lewis Hamilton can very much see a couple of cars ahead of him, the man that he's chasing down. Maybe he was losing a bit of time, Max, trying to lap cars, and Lewis is now losing time as well, Martin.
Well, Seb's on the slicks, but he wasn't very kind there to Lewis trying to lap him, and still isn't. And he's obviously thinking, oh, he's gone, let him through.
How are conditions, Max?
Yeah, trying, but not enough.
So that 2-second advantage that Hamilton had gained, he's lost a chunk of that by trying to get past Vettel.
Yeah. Well, Vettel's telling us that slicks, it's too early for slicks, as Max already knows. You can see the inside. Look at that. Well, they lean in about 3.5 degrees of camber, the top leaning in. And that's why they burn out the inside of the tyres, rear camber around 2 degrees. And they are getting down to almost slick conditions, aren't they, in terms of the surface of the tyre.
But in Turkey, that's when they were really excelling. Mercedes and Hamilton were really excelling when the Inters lost their tread.
Yeah, as long as you don't get a structural failure of the tyre.
So still no cars going faster on dry.
Yeah, Bottas wants to change his tyres. The pit wall are telling him, look, just stick with it. This is still the best tyre to be on.
So we're getting towards the pit stop phase, the one stop we're expecting in this race. And just at that moment, Hamilton starts closing the gap.
And you know I said that Lando Norris had put a bit of daylight between himself and his teammate Daniel Ricciardo. Well, behind him, Carlos Sainz very much catching Daniel Ricciardo and is going for the overtake at the Tamburello chicane. And he's got the overtake done as well. Sainz in the Ferrari. And McLaren told us this morning that Ferrari had a pace deficit in a straight line to the McLaren. Certainly didn't look at it like it in those conditions.
Still wet in some places.
Roger.
And Lewis going to a lot more trouble to cool his tyres down from what I've seen on this lap than Max is out front at the moment by finding what little bit of standing water there is.
This is the sort of conditions Hamilton has shown in the past where he and his car really can excel in. And that gap now is under 2 seconds. It was 5. Ted, to you.
But that was as the number 22, Yuki Tsunoda, comes into the pits to go onto slicks. We'll see what kind of grip he's got. That was absolutely the right thing to do for McLaren, to do that team order for Danny Rick to let Lando through, wasn't it? Because it was 9 seconds the gap that Lando had pulled on Danny Rick, and it's now up to much more than that, isn't it?
Yeah.
9, 10, 11, 12, 11 seconds. So, yeah, Lando Norris getting after Sergio Perez. So Lando is going to be a net 4th after this, isn't it?
Well, with Perez has got that penalty.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And to you.
Yeah, so I was just listening to Vettel's radio, and he says now it's the time for slicks. He's feeling that his car's now performing well, the tyres are in their happy place. So it's any moment soon.
And he's setting personal bests as well. And they're getting interested, Martin, down at the Red Bull garage as well. With that gap now 1.9 seconds between Verstappen and Hamilton. Are they both going to come in, I wonder?
Yeah, who's going to blink first?
Max, thoughts on conditions?
Yeah, well, if the slicks are not better, then what do you want me to do? It's getting very dry, that's sure, but one line.
And he does not. He does pit. He does pit. Will Lewis follow him in? No.
Oh, now. Interesting. They sit impassively in the Mercedes garage looking at their monitors. There was never any doubt that they were going to keep Lewis Hamilton out. Verstappen first to blink.
They've gone for the overcut. They're hoping that while Max is getting up to speed on his tyres, Lewis can go faster. So I would imagine with Lewis there would have been...
Hey, firm. Let's go for it, Lewis. Let's go for it. You've got 1 lap.
Yeah, it was... So Red Bull then pulled the trigger first. They've come into the pits. Let's see if they gain the high ground. It really depends on how much confidence Max has got on this outlook with his medium compound tyres on. That should get him to the end.
Those slicks look shiny enough in dry conditions when they come out from a pit stop. They look slippy and slippery and slidey and shiny today. And Verstappen will be very, very edgy as Hamilton sets the best first sector time that we've seen so far in this race. Now, he's not behind Verstappen. He's been let loose for 1 lap to see if that overcut works. Verstappen pits first. Mercedes hoping that Hamilton a lap later can pit and take the lead. Medium tyres going on to the Ferrari as that pits of Carlos Sainz and back out into the race. 28.5 second gap to Lewis Hamilton, and that is right on the cusp of Hamilton being able to take the lead of this race if his crew do a fast enough job with the tyre change as well. Hamilton is now just coming into the pit lane entry, and Ted Kravitz, you can see him.
This one needs to be perfect, Mercedes, but they know that. He's very slow into the box, very steady, a little slow on the front. Oh, he's got to wait for the Alfa Romeo to pass. Giovinazzi passes. It's a scrubbed set of medium tyres. I'm not sure that was a bit slower than it should have been.
It was 4 seconds, Martin.
Yeah, the right front seemed to be a while going on, and that's released Verstappen. He was quicker in the middle sector anyway on his out lap than Hamilton was on his in lap.
You'll see Verstappen coming up right now. Hamilton gets to the end of the pit lane. Oh, it's almost like Tokyo Drift as he tries to get the power down, but the Red Bull goes through, and Hamilton, had he been a second quicker, stationary, might just have been able to take the lead properly in this race. Penalty for Perez.
Yeah, Perez, and a change of steering wheel as well for good measure. Are they allowed to work on the car before the 10 seconds is up?
No.
With the steering wheel?
You wait 10 seconds, and then they're allowed to work after that. So Hamilton stops.
Yeah. The right front was a while coming off, wasn't it? And that's given Verstappen track position and, of course, a lap of knowledge of where he can find some grip on these dry tyres.
Right, so Verstappen, Hamilton, Leclerc have all pitted. Now Valtteri Bottas gets to pit for Mercedes. Norris has pitted too, as has Sergio Perez, has served his penalty. So Norris now ahead of Sergio Perez and up into 4th place. Carlos Sainz runs 6th. Valtteri Bottas was running in 7th place. Ricciardo now takes that 7th place off him, and Bottas will come back out onto the track behind the McLaren. Lance Stroll, who has pitted as well, now down in 9th place. George Russell is back up into the points again as Fernando Alonso comes in for his next pit stop. Kimi Raikkonen runs 11th ahead of his teammate Antonio Giovinazzi. There's Kimi Raikkonen on the track, as we can see. And there is car number 44, Lewis Hamilton, who has got to get past Kimi Raikkonen before he can get to Max Verstappen.
Yeah, Verstappen is just coming up now to lap that little pack that is Mick Schumacher, Valtteri Bottas. Who else is in there? Sebastian Vettel, I think, is in there as well.
Yeah.
There it is.
There it is right now. They're jockeying for position. They're looking for the blue flags as well, and the gap at the moment between Verstappen and Hamilton is about 4 and a bit seconds. But Hamilton has just set the fastest first sector time we've seen so far.
This hasn't worked very well traffic-wise for Max Verstappen. He's had to wait all the way through Acqua Minerale before he can even pick off the first one. Now he gets the second one.
Hamilton's taken about a second and a half out of Verstappen on this lap so far, as Verstappen picks his way through those lapped cars. And by the time they get to the main straight, Hamilton will be fancying his chances to get past a lot more cars a lot more quickly than Max managed to on this particular lap.
Yeah, Seb Vettel doing the fastest lap of the Grand Prix so far. He wouldn't get a World Championship point for that because he's outside of the top 10 as Valtteri Bottas gets lapped by Max Verstappen.
That's going to hurt, isn't it? Valtteri Bottas on lap 31 getting lapped by the race leader. Now tries to pick up a slipstream. His teammate Lewis Hamilton trying to do the same as well. 1.8 seconds the gap, but Hamilton's still got a lot of cars to try and find his way through on this lap.
And Stroll passed Bottas in that as well, in the middle of that.
It's all changes and trying to work out who's lapped, who's on the lead lap. Well, everyone has been lapped so far by the race leader, down to Valtteri Bottas, who is in 9th place. Oh, and sliding off the road goes the Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton.
Oh,
and I think he might be, unless he can find reverse, and he's kept the engine running. This is absolute disaster for Lewis Hamilton.
Broken front wing anyway, of course. Unfortunately, but yeah, he needed reverse before he needed first there. I mean, these cars have got horrendously poor steering lock on them because the front tyres are so wide. The exact opposite to a London taxi, for example. And Lewis's pace had been sensational on the previous lap.
So whilst Verstappen carries out on in front, extending his advantage metre by metre, Hamilton is sat trying to escape from the gravel trap and the runoff road and just try and find a way out of this situation.
Yeah, he realises, I mean, it's effectively a front-wheel drive car right now, isn't it, as he reverses out. Smart thinking. He put so few revs on. He knows that as soon as you spin the wheels, you start digging yourself into the gravel, and away he goes, but he's going to need, of course, a pit stop.
So you can see the damage there to the front wing. Lewis Hamilton, who has had, what, 50 consecutive points finishes, and we're going to get a safety car now, because that's Valtteri Bottas and George Russell, who are out of this race, and they look like they've had a big coming together as well.
So somebody's dropped it in the braking zone coming down the hill by the looks of it, because the brake marker boards have all caught up in the accident. So it looks as if somebody, so both Mercedes then at the same time, and Russell was running in the World Championship points for Williams as well, but somebody's dropped it under braking.
Second year running here at Imola, George Russell running in the points and crashes out of the race. And I think that he was trying to overtake Valtteri Bottas when the two came together. He goes over to make sure Bottas is okay, and there is Fernando Alonso in the Alpine getting going as well.
Yeah, you're not, I think we think George was trying to overtake him on the grass and lost it. You're never that popular with the stewards if you spin your car when there are double waved yellow flags out, as Fernando just did.
Right, so the one person that has been helped is Lewis Hamilton, who was limping back to the pits anyway, but now does it under safety car conditions. A stroke of fortune going his way after the bad misfortune down at Tosa. Ted.
Lewis was shaking his head in the pit box. He knows he's made a mistake. You don't see Lewis Hamilton make a mistake too often, do you? Maybe we'll get a mitigating circumstance if there is one, but on the face of it, it looks like a mistake. And that 32, Mercedes lose 3 of their drivers, don't they? But, well, Hamilton will recover.
Right, we're just watching a replay now, Ted, on board with George Russell, who hits Bottas. Yes, because he gets onto the grass. So he's going for the overtake, gets onto the grass, gets a tank slapper, runs straight into Bottas.
You can hear the you could hear the engine revs go up. Massive impact. Once again, we're seeing the integrity of the front of the chassis extraordinarily strong and effective. And yeah, so
what a Are you okay, Valtteri?
Big one. All good.
What the was he doing? Honestly, is he a or what?
Right, well, both drivers quite clearly blaming each other. I think Valtteri might be a little bit winded by that.
Absolutely top speed there, 295 kilometers per hour. What's that, 180 odd miles per hour? And no wonder he's winded.
Winded and wounded. It had not been a great race for Valtteri Bottas, but the way that he's made his exit from this race, well, that usurps anything that had been going on before. And Toto Wolff, well, might want to have a word with both George Russell and Valtteri Bottas after this race. As Ted was pointing out, George Russell very much in the Mercedes stable. Right, and they've red flagged the race. They've red flagged the race while we watched Lewis Hamilton sliding off, and this is what caused him to damage his front wing. The race has now been red flagged.
So sorry, guys.
Yeah, no sweat.
So that they can clear the debris at what you said, Martin, the fastest part of the track.
Yeah, Lewis has just been moving up the inside of a back marker into Tosa, has locked a wheel. No ABS brakes on these cars. It's all about the driver modulation. And as soon as the wheel blocks, you've got no retardation, and then you're sort of in double trouble at that point. I would imagine they need to check the integrity of the barriers here as well,
Look
for
at the
good
damage
measure.
to the arm coat.
Yeah, we've got to check the barriers out, clear the debris away and all of the pieces of carbon. Otherwise, people are going to be picking up punctures left, right, and centre. But you know what? Lewis Hamilton was running 4th. I believe he was still running 4th on the road in all of that. So, as you said, it's by being able to pit under the safety car, it didn't hurt him too much. But where is he showing at the moment? He's showing 9th. In the race.
We saw...
Oh, he's a lap down. He's a lap down. That's why. That's why it looked as if he was in quite a good position behind the safety car. but he's actually a lap down.
So when they restart the race, does Hamilton continue to be a lap down? One would assume that he does.
It was a while getting out of the gravel trap, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And then he had to coast round. But let's see. Obviously, so the race can have a total elapsed time of 4 hours.
They stop the clock as well. Within that 4 hours, the race has 2 hours in which to run. So it's 4 hours from start to checkered flag, but to allow for red flags incidents like we have now, there is a 2-hour race running window. That's a lot of damage and a lot of debris to clear up for the marshals there. Good luck to all the marshals as they come out onto the track. Let's see it again. Not going to see much from that angle. Ooh.
Oh, it's a wonder they didn't collect the other 2 cars as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On board with George Russell.
Well, we need to see to our left. It does look like, from that angle, it does look like George collected some grass on the right-hand side, doesn't it? But we need to see the head-on camera.
I wonder if Valtteri moves a little to the right. There was still plenty of space for George Russell when he did, but in doing so, I wonder if that rather spooked him a little bit, spooked George Russell a little bit, and that's why he then veers in the way that he does.
Yeah, a single digit coming out there from Valtteri, and it's almost like George Russell lashed out at him.
Yeah. Well, he believes that it was Valtteri's fault, and Valtteri very much believes that that was George Russell's fault, and that's, well, there's 2 drivers that might need to go and see Headmaster Wolf to have a little chat a bit later on. But if George did get spooked, and it's 190 miles an hour, you can understand it. If someone just slightly veers out to the right, then that sets off the chain. Either way, Lewis Hamilton with a lot to think about himself as well, and a race that is, well, it started badly, being overtaken by Max Verstappen into the first corner, and it has continued to go steadily worse to the point now that he finds himself behind this red flag in 9th position.
They are allowed to work on the cars. They are allowed to change the tyres. And we'll get going, and I'm imagining it will be, well, what will it be? Safety car restart? Or do you think they would go back to a standing start?
Should go back to a standing start.
Yeah.
That's what we've had recently. So there's the debris from Valtteri Bottas's car. Apologies if you, like the rest of us, saw the reaction of Valtteri Bottas. If anyone was offended by that, apologies for it. And if you are just joining us here at Imola, you've missed quite a race. Luckily, if you're a Sky Q customer, you can use the recap facility and you can go back and look at quite a lot of action so far. This man, Yuki Tsunoda, has been involved in a fair few overtakes himself, starting 19th on the grid because Sebastian Vettel started from the pit lane up to 10th, and with a great chance of a few more points from there as well. It's a complete reset here on what has been a struggle for so many drivers out there, Martin. There might be a few quite glad of this red flag to actually have that little reset, think about it once again, and to get going when we get going. And it might be some time because there's a lot of debris for the marshals to clear up.
Yeah, it's the barriers, isn't it, is the concern in terms of how long it's going to take. But that'll be the key thing. We can sweep the debris away quite quickly, relatively speaking, but the integrity of all of the safety systems down there.
Ted Kravitz, you have a view over the pit lane of a lot of cars and a lot of people standing around.
Well, a lot of drivers sort of figuring out what on earth is going on. Lewis Hamilton is walking with his trainer, Angela Cullen, back to his pits. Angela had brought his little scooter down there that Lewis likes to save time by using. Lewis choosing not to use that. Going back, I would imagine, into his room to collect himself. Max Verstappen seems happy enough with everything. Mask on, always thinking about the COVID protocols. Max Verstappen talking to Christian Horner on the Red Bull pit wall. Sergio Perez, Verstappen's teammate, has been up here to sort of explain to Adrian Newey exactly what was going on. And now the engineers are going down to look at the car. I'm sure they can change that anything they want to on Hamilton's cars. A lot of dusty and dirty bits on the floor after getting out of that gravel trap, even though, of course, the front wing was itself changed. But yeah, otherwise, everyone just sort of taking in what could have been an absolutely horrific accident around that Tamburello area. As people see more and more replays of that, it sort of chills you slightly, doesn't it?
Always, any high-speed accident does, but absolutely, Ted. Certain tracks, certain parts of the track, there is always the worry when cars come together at high speed, but both drivers walking away from that accident, I'm sure, will be exchanging views at some stage later on as well. This, the 4th race to be red flagged in the last 12 Grand Prix. Monza, at the Tuscan Grand Prix at Mugello, and at Bahrain, of course, as well. We had red flags then. We hadn't had any red flags at all in the entire 2018 or 2019 seasons. We're kind of making up for lost time with it now. As out come the track sweepers.
So what will happen then when Michael Massey, the race director, are we going to see a different angle? And then we are. I mean, he's been matching Bottas on pace, hasn't he? It's going to be really difficult with that camera angle to work out exactly what happens, but somewhere along the line, George's right rear tire, you can hear the revs go up. Let's just listen to it. It's a fair overtake.
There's just a slight movement from Bottas.
Yeah, Valtteri wasn't leaving him a whole lot of space, but and that's what George will say is, look, he just you know, he got a run on him. Yeah. He'd got a very big run on him with the drag reduction system open as well, and a slipstream, of course. Now this is an angle. It was a little jink right and left, wasn't it?
Yep.
And at that point, Russell's wandered onto the grass, the wet grass, of course.
As soon as he's got there, he's starting to lose control.
Seatbelt buckle coming out of the car.
It's a good angle that we can watch from again from Kimi Raikkonen's.
It was George is going to say, look, you veered right while I was alongside you and put me on the grass.
I wonder what Toto Wolff is going to say to either of those drivers. I'm sure there'll be a few words.
So what happens now is we'll get a 10-minute notice and go through a start procedure. They're allowed, as I said, to change tyres, repair any damage, and cool and warm the cars as required, and ready to restart. They will go out behind the safety car, and then the race director will decide if it's a safety car restart, i.e. all line astern and a big crocodile, or a standing start. He will let them know, and we'll see that. We'll see the SS on the boards beside the track for a standing start. So we don't know yet. I mean, the conditions are such that a standing start seems feasible, of course, and we don't have amalgamated times.
No.
So it will then be a race to the finish. It's not like we'll have to...
Not like Damon's days.
Yeah, where we'll have to keep working out, you know, how far ahead he was when the red flag was flown.
What is interesting is that as it stands at the moment, Red Bull will be taking the lead in the Constructors' Championship and in the Drivers' Championship through Max Verstappen as well. And I know it's early days in the season, but Mercedes have led both championships since Germany, 2018. It's a significant day so far here at the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix.
It's also lap 34 of 63.
Just watch George Russell, by the way, out in front. Should Russell have been in a different position when Lewis Hamilton went off there? Could he have got off the racing line? He was being lapped by Hamilton. Did Hamilton kind of need him to not be where he was, or is that just unfortunate timing?
George Russell was on the racing line. Yeah, he was actually, that's a good point. George, the reserve or the junior Mercedes driver, was involved with, in an incident with both the works Mercedes cars, but he left him the line into the corner. I don't know. It's such a short run and a diagonal out of Villeneuve into Tosa that you're kind of damned whatever you do there, I think. So no, I don't think he'll be
you're losing so much time in moving to the inside to allow someone to go around the outside of you. And when you're in the race that Russell was in with Bottas at the time, you don't really want to do it. Get rid of these blue flags, you see, then you don't have to move at all, and someone's got to try and overtake you. But then we might get some of that as well. That is an extensive amount of damage.
And of course, you'll have gearboxes taking a lot of impact, a lot of load, and shock load through them. That's a new chassis.
Yeah,
or a lot of work for. I think they both chassis look like they're done and dusted.
So let's just take a few moments to look at the incidents that we've seen, the ramifications that's had for the race. Charles Leclerc pops up on our screen. Good timing, because Charles Leclerc is now up into second place for Ferrari here. Lando Norris up into the podium positions and was going well. Might really fancy his chances from here on in as well against a Ferrari that McLaren believe they've got a pace advantage, certainly down the straights. Sergio Perez has served his time penalty and will now start in fourth place when the race gets going without the threat of a penalty hanging over him. Carlos Sainz, who we see just talking there to the Ferrari pit wall, currently fifth ahead of Daniel Ricciardo, who was losing ground somewhat, but now obviously gets to start and reset like the rest. Lance Stroll will start seventh. He's the first of the cars that have been lapped in this race. Kimi Räikkönen eighth, Lewis Hamilton is starting ninth, and Yuki Tsunoda in 10th place. So there's a lot of drivers here who have had misadventures. Carlos Sainz saying I've made mistakes. They've had penalties applied like Sergio Perez. They've lost ground like Lewis Hamilton, who have all got a chance to make up some ground here that they might not have had without the red flag.
So I'm assuming Max there is looking at pole position, ready for the standing start, restart, see how dry it is. He's got his brain engaged, hasn't he?
He certainly has.
Go out there and have a little look at the territory from what is now pole position. If they didn't restart, the race would be decided on the lap before the red flag was flying. So, which always gives you a bit of a count back, of course.
And it would be half points as well, because we're yet to get to 75% distance in this race. Lap 48 is 75% distance for those that want to keep an eye on that sort of thing this afternoon. Keeping an eye on many screens at Sky Race Control, Anthony Davidson.
Yeah, well, that was an interesting. I was just watching back on George Russell, the man of the moment, really. We've been talking about him. So the first one to clear up is this moment into Villeneuve chicane. I was just riding on board with him. He gets the blue light before turning in to turn 5. And, I mean, because of the wet on either side, it complicates things for him and everyone else that's in that train. You're driving on train tracks. There's nowhere else you can go, and that ultimately is what's called out Lewis Hamilton as he's gone down the inside. George peels off to the right-hand side before turn 7 at Tosa. He's got his wheel right up against the white line, but obviously to the left-hand side is the wet. He slows down and actually gives up lap time and space to Valtteri in front of him at the time to allow Lewis to get into that area. But unfortunately, Lewis is on the wet stuff, goes in a bit too hot, and we all know what happened. So that was the first moment. Second moment, the jury's still out. There is a little bit of movement from Valtteri to the right, but because it's a nose cam shot, it's the only one we have at the moment. We can maybe get a proper onboard later to see the steering angle and stuff like that, and where he was looking from inside the car. The stewards will have all of that at their disposal. So the only shot I have at the moment is a nose cam, but there is movement to the right, which is the normal racing line. It's just that George had committed to the outside, and like we know, got his wheel on the grass, because like you said, Crofty, I think he was a bit spooked by that movement to the right. There was a car's width, but it's the element of doubt that a driver has when you go for a move like that that made him go ultimately a bit too wide.
Thanks ever so much, Anthony. When we get the 5-minute signal, as you can see on your screen there, the following cars should be rolled to the pit exit. That is Lance Stroll downwards, so including Lewis Hamilton. And the reason they're doing that is because they will then need to go round the track and get to the back of the pack in the pit lane before they can then go out on the formation lap to the grid once again. What it basically does is it unlaps the cars that have all been lapped, and is a way of doing that without pressing Control or Delete on the timing screens. think that's the easiest way to try and explain that.
Yeah, good point.
So they'll be able to unlap themselves. As it is at the moment, we haven't got a 5-minute signal, so stand down if you think the race is coming in 5 minutes' time, but don't go anywhere.
Nobody out there looking like they're trying to fix barriers, which is good news, very good news. Been an expensive day for Williams, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Remember, Nicholas Latifi went headfirst into the barriers as well with that contact very early on. And then the sister Williams, for good measure, has taken a big bite out of the barriers.
First time Williams have had 2 cars out of the race since Russia 2019. Any more thoughts as we see another replay?
Bottas definitely moved to the right and pinched him a little bit and then moved back left again.
Let's see on that, but to be honest, both Raikkonen and Mick Schumacher lucky that they didn't get hit by any debris, run over any debris or get involved as well.
I mean, luckily they both lost a lot of speed, hadn't they? By the time you get the second impact, when a lot of your crash structure has probably done work. It was Valtteri who went immediately into that. Well, they both went into the left barrier, but I think it was the Mercedes that made the big dent on the left-hand side. Yeah. That was the impact that would have winded him. The final one wasn't too bad, but George is obviously feeling that he was squeezed at a critical point there.
That's why he marches over to Valtteri Bottas with a certain amount of determination. Bottas, well, flicks up his opinion, and George Russell just gives a little flick to the top of the visor to give his opinion. 9 minutes' time, we are going to resume this race. Ted Kravitz.
Yeah, a little unseemly that, isn't it? They should remember what happened back there in 1994, those two, shouldn't they? Could be an awful lot worse. Could be an awful lot worse. The halo did its job, didn't it?
Absolutely.
With George's tyre, George's front left it would have been.
As it has continued to do so ever since it was introduced.
On Bottas's, but it would have been on the side, wouldn't it? It would have been on the side element rather than the front part of the halo to protect Bottas's head from George's front left tyre coming towards him and knocking him on the side of the head. So that's good to see. Another win for the halo. But yeah, as for Hamilton, he's starting the process of resetting. Part of that is to, as you saw earlier, him walking down the pit lane, put his Bluetooth headphones on, got his iPhone out, just waiting. If you've got a bit of time, get some music, get his head right, and see what he can do from here. But yeah, I was just seeing various people getting back ready again. Daniel Ricciardo right in front of me. He's at the end of the queue, not of course on track, but that will get all sorted out when the lapped cars get put away and everyone gets going again. But yeah, Ricciardo just discussing with his engineer Tom Stallard about what they can do to the car, anything to make him feel a little bit more comfortable. The headmaster Ross Brawn just making his way from the front of the restart line now back towards race control. So just keeping everyone under his little guise there.
Thank you very much indeed, Ted. So 3 minutes' time, the cars that have been lapped can all be rolled to the pit exit. And in about 8 minutes' time, or 7.5 minutes' time, we get a race restart as well. I hope you've enjoyed the race so far. I'm sure Damon Hill and Simon Lazenby have. Gentlemen.
Yeah, we have. I think we're enjoying it from the neutrals perspective a little bit more than perhaps Toto Wolff would have enjoyed lap 32 there. You know, if we think that George Russell may one day become in one of those Mercedes seats, involved potentially in both of those incidents.
Yeah, they get over these things, don't they? I don't think there's going to be any long-lasting feud. I think George Russell was definitely a bit freaked out by that experience, as was probably Valtteri Bottas. Neither of them expected to end up like that. And we heard basically, I think that Valtteri did move a little bit, but the problem for George was he moved on to a damp bit and he was flat out, and it broke traction and just took him into Valtteri's car. So these things happen when it's slippery and wet like that.
Would you point your finger at one in particular?
No, I would not. I mean, I genuinely think it was not an intentional move by Valtteri. He's not that kind of driver. He wasn't. He was racing, but he was. I think that he didn't understand or didn't appreciate, or George Russell had the opportunity to lift, but he decided to stay flat on a very tricky, damp part of the track.
Nevertheless, would you imagine they'll be in the headmaster's office?
Look, you know, I think they inevitably. I don't think it's like that in the Formula One. I don't, you don't go back to the office and they go, "What the hell are you doing, guys?" I mean, I suppose the only good thing is they're not teammates, even if they are both using Mercedes engines. But you know, it does happen, especially in tricky conditions like we've seen, and even the 7 times world champion can slither off the track in the damp.
But it's a big moment, that, in the context of the championship. Early in the season, I know that, but did George have made it a little easier for Lewis?
No, I think he did. I think basically he stayed on the dry line. Lewis decided to go down the inside and got on water on his tyres, and then that meant he hadn't got any grip to stay on the track. So, you know, everyone makes their own decisions in this sport, and Lewis knows what he's doing, or should know what he's doing by now. And no, I think that's fair enough.
Okay. Obviously a little bit of aggro shown as well between George and Valtteri after the coming together. We did hear Toto over the radio say, "Come on, Valtteri, come on, get on with it." You know, he was languishing. He was potentially, if you look at his weekend overall, he shouldn't be down starting in 8th position anyway.
It's not going to be a great weekend for Valtteri, is it? I don't think he's going to come away from this one feeling extremely buoyed up. I mean, he needs a good race, doesn't he, pretty soon?
Does indeed. So if they line up again for the standing start, Verstappen from Leclerc, from Norris, Perez back into things. He's had his difficulties.
Yes, but you see, it's an opportunity, isn't it, for some of these people to redeem themselves. Of course, Lando Norris lost his best qualifying lap, but there he is now, starting on 3rd on the grid.
Yep, okay, there we go. So as we're saying, starting again in around about 4.5 minutes' time, and you can see those cars being wheeled to the pit lane exit. Let's get back upstairs to Martin and to David to see how this one pans out.
Well, I'm making no predictions, which is probably a good idea, because my predictions often turn out to be completely and utterly wrong, Martin Brundle. The one thing I would say is that Max Verstappen has perhaps had the best day, not the easiest day, but the best day of anyone out there, because he has managed to keep hold of the lead, apart from that one moment where he pitted and Lewis Hamilton stayed out for an extra lap. Mercedes threw the overcut gamble, and it didn't quite pay off after a slow pit stop, and Mercedes, when we do resume, find themselves with Hamilton down in 9th place and Bottas and Russell out of the race, along with Nicholas Latifi. 3 cars that have made their exit from this Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. We've had a lot of surprises. I dare say in the 29 laps we've got to go, we might get a few more.
And they've got to survive again the 605-metre run from pole position to turn 2. Turn 1 is the kink. You'd normally say it doesn't really exist, but it certainly existed for Bottas and Russell there. But yeah. And of course, it's going to be wet either side of the racing line a little bit, as well as Lewis found out to his great cost.
Okay, speak on the board. Speak on the board. Take off the earplugs here. Take off the earplugs, because I've got noise. Only earplugs, so I can speak but can't hear you.
A few radio communication issues for Charles Leclerc, trying to make himself understood. So what we'll have is a race resuming at 16:25 local time, so in about 2.5 minutes time, but the lapped cars have now taken themselves out of order and put themselves in the order that they should be at the end of the pit lane. So the lead of those, Lance Stroll, who was in 7th, will make his way from where he was within that pit lane to go to the front, and the rest will then follow. And the safety car will go through the pit lane after he's guided the lapped runners on 3.05 miles of this track. Medium tyres on Lewis Hamilton's car. A set of mediums, Martin, will get you to the end of the race, but would a set of softs get you to the end of the race as well?
Touch and go, but I think they generally quite like the medium tyres, didn't they, in the longer runs. Anyway.
And of course, Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton will have been able to, well, the crew rather than Lewis, will have been able to fix the front wing, replace that front wing after the damage from the start, where he tangled together with Max Verstappen.
Yeah, it's had a bit of a day out with that front wing on the front of Lewis's car there.
Yeah, somewhat. After his day out, Williams driver returns to garage. I wonder if is he about to have another little look at what went on there. Nicholas Latifi to his teammate, saying, to himself. He's got a few images to play with there. Latifi we lost at the start of this race. Sergio Perez picked up a 10-second penalty and then a stop-go penalty. First of all, for overtaking behind the safety car, and that penalty. That's all gone now. Start this race in 4th place. And what can Lewis Hamilton do from the position he finds himself in? It's a tough ask, but the more he can salvage today, the better off it might be later on in the season.
Yeah, he's a long way ahead of the pack there as Lewis, but they'll come in to the pit lane to join at the back, as you predicted, Crofty, with the relatively warm tyres. But of course, those sitting in the pit lane still have the tyres in the blankets. They're off now because they need to get ready to head out. And the safety car should lead them out unless the race director decides just go straight to a standing start. Let's see what he's going to decide.
We'll see, as Ted was explaining, the SS board on the side of the grid. So the pit lane entry is now open, and those cars that were lapped have unlapped themselves. So now, all on the same lap, we can start again. Well, Schumacher and Mazepin are another couple of laps down. And there you see the positions gained and lost in this race so far. Tsunoda, 10 places he's made up in this race so far.
Rolling start, not a standing start. So it's like a safety car restart, effectively. So we won't see them, that's a shame, we won't see them charging off down to the first corner off the grid.
Is that because Michael Massey would have thought, look, it's dry enough for slick tyres out there, but it's still a little bit damp, and if I have 17 cars sat on the grid with the tyres cooling down, we might get another incident the first time they put the brakes on, so it's better just to keep them for a rolling start.
I hope not. It's, you know, ultimately the ultimate safety, stay home and not go racing at all, isn't it? So we need, yeah, it does look, it would be a bit treacherous down there, I must admit, but no more than you would say normally get on a bit of a damp start. On any other given day at a Grand Prix.
For Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc, this race is turning into a very nice afternoon, but they're going to have to watch the Red Bull of Sergio Perez behind them. Verstappen and Leclerc start on the medium tyre. Norris and Perez start on the soft compound tyre. It's mediums for Carlos Sainz. It's soft for Daniel Ricciardo. Mediums, as we saw, for Lewis Hamilton, and behind him, Yuki Tsunoda on the soft compound tyre.
Extraordinarily, still 17 runners then.
What's happened here to Kimi Räikkönen? Oh, we very nearly made it 16.
Yeah, he gave it a fairly big squirt of throttle, didn't he? And with the battery...
Oh, Max Verstappen, what's happened there? Just trying to light up his tyres somewhat on the entry into Ravazza, and a trip to the grass that wasn't part of the playbook. So...
Ooh, that was a lucky one, Max.
It was. And he retains the advantage, stays out in the lead, very nearly got caught right before the end of the lap before we go racing again. And finally, after this safety car restart, after the red flag, we can go racing again, and Lando Norris is wasting no time whatsoever getting stuck into some racing. He's got past Charles Leclerc and up into second place. Verstappen leads from Norris, then comes Leclerc, Perez, Sainz and Ricciardo, and going off at the back it's Yuki Tsunoda. Tsunoda, who's made up 10 places in this race, is now going to see all that good work come to an end in the space of 600 metres down to the first corner at the restart.
Yeah, and if he doesn't get that out of the gravel, we might see another safety car. But look, Lando Norris is pretty feisty, isn't he, in second place there?
Isn't he just? Verstappen then ahead of Norris. Hamilton has managed to get past Kimi Räikkönen and is up into 8th place. Gap to Verstappen, 5 seconds. It was a lap when he went off down at Tosa, but it's now just 6 seconds as it was to Max Verstappen. Hamilton certainly gained by that red flag incident, and we can see what happened to Yuki Tsunoda.
That is one of those horrible, painful, slow spins, really. But he does get away, and the track is now clear. But he's put a lot of gravel on it, I'd imagine. They're saying it's a slippery surface down there. So I'd imagine
surface here as well, when Verstappen went off.
Yes.
Wow. So drama at the restart. Verstappen then leads Norris over the line, 0.8 of a second the gap. Then comes Charles Leclerc and then Sergio Perez. Behind Perez, Sainz and Ricciardo. And then behind Ricciardo, Lance Stroll in 7th place ahead of Hamilton, Raikkonen and Giovinazzi.
Yeah, Norris has really fired those soft compound tyres up a treat, hasn't he, for the restart?
It was a good move to make for McLaren in terms of the restart. What he's got to try and do is hold on to those tyres until the end of this race. The medium compound runners will go towards the to the end of the race and will easily get to the checkered flag. Will the softs be able to make it? That's entirely up to Lando Norris and his right foot, I'm sure. He was under a little bit of pressure out there at the moment. Carlos Sainz is right behind Sergio Perez, as we can see Charles Leclerc. It'll take a couple of laps for his tyres just to get up to a better temperature, and then when they do, well, he might be able to put Lando Norris back under pressure once more.
Yeah, Norris has got to get to the end of the race on those tyres, so it's a reasonably big call, I'd say, on the soft tyres, but conditions are cool, just 11 degrees air, 18 degrees track temperature, so if he babysits them a bit, he should be fine.
Verstappen starting to set best sector times out in front as well. It's been a tricky afternoon for him, but it's a good margin to have, isn't it? 1.5 seconds. He's had a DRS threat as well from Lando Norris. Charles Leclerc comes past in 3rd place, then Perez, Sainz, Ricciardo, Stroll and Hamilton. And we look there in the background to see behind the McLaren of Sainz, Daniel Ricciardo starting to lose ground a little bit on the Spaniard. The man, of course, whose seat he took at McLaren when Sainz decided that Ferrari was the way to go for the next few years.
Yeah, Max looks more comfortable now, doesn't he? Now he's got some temperature in the mediums. Back a little bit strung out. Lewis 9.5 seconds off the lead now, and being back in the pack was over 2 seconds slower just on that lap alone.
Started on pole position, as you can see, now running down in 8th place, and the man ahead of him, Lance Stroll, in a Mercedes-powered car, and a car that has been heavily influenced by Mercedes, I'm sure, as well. Hamilton's got to try and find a way to get past Stroll, and as each sector goes by, he loses more ground to Max Verstappen out in front. But for Hamilton, limiting damage here to try and get, if he can, to round about 6th place, maybe 5th, if he's on a proper charge. Would that be doable?
It ought to be, especially when they reintroduce the drag reduction system after a couple of laps from the restart. It's 44. He doesn't have the DRS yet. The car should be. They'll obviously put the new front wing on with the same wing setting. It should be mighty fast, but it's not an easy track to overtake. And we know the Mercedes is not always the best car at overtaking. Somebody else has been off.
And I think it was round about here as well. And I think that car is parked at the side of the track as well. Not quite sure who it is at the moment. Sergio Perez. Sergio Perez off into the gravel, as you can see. Oh, Perez, who was sat in 4th place and looking to put some pressure on Charles Leclerc, has just overcooked it at the Villeneuve chicane, and he has tumbled all the way down to 14th place. Poor afternoon for Sergio Perez. It continues to get worse. This is what happened.
He just got a little bit wide. Left rear tyre dipped on.
No damage.
Yeah, he just got a little bit wide and the left rear tyre dipped into the damp part of the track. Oh dear, Sergio.
Wow. That then promotes those behind him. Sainz and Ricciardo, Stroll, Hamilton, Raikkonen, Giovinazzi, Alonso, all up into an improved points position. Now DRS is available for Lewis Hamilton. They've extended it this year, give him another 200 metres to try and get past Stroll. Into the chicane he goes. Stroll's going to make this hard. Hamilton hangs on in there and gets past Lance Stroll, moves up into 6th place. They got very, very close, the Mercedes and the Aston Martin, but they kept it fair. And Hamilton now into 6th place. Now he needs to charge after Daniel Ricciardo.
Yeah, that was a very important move there for Lewis. DRS assisted, of course. They've added 100 metres to that DRS zone this year compared to the end of last year, which I think has energised it a lot. And Lewis then going to the inside. And of course, it would be so easy for him to just snatch the front left brake there on the slightly damper part of the track. He can now get off down the road towards Daniel Ricciardo.
You can argue there that the DRS did exactly what it's designed to do, enable the car behind to arrive into the corner, into the braking zone, alongside the car ahead.
And then the driver's got to finish it off himself.
That's exactly what DRS is meant to do, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it's a bit too powerful, and sometimes not powerful enough.
Looking handy for Ferrari today as well, in 3rd and 4th place.
Well, this is a very good day for Ferrari in 3rd and 4th, and one of their best days at a racetrack for quite some time, and in Italy as well.
What's happening with the shifts?
It keeps losing sync at the moment, Lance. We're looking into it.
Which is obviously hampering his progress, especially down the straights as well. Hamilton's just set the fastest lap of the race. Ted, to you.
So McLaren telling Lando Norris to look after the tyres. I think Lando will know that anyway going to the end on the soft tyre, but they're sort of worried a little bit about Charles Leclerc. I think that's why you're seeing the timing graphic. I think you're seeing whether Leclerc is able to close on the harder tyre. Leclerc, of course, the Ferrari, close on the McLaren. We'll see if they can do that. But yeah, Verstappen has dropped Norris now quite comprehensively after that first time. The way these tyres are, if you take life out of them too early, then they just don't give you any life at the end of the stint. That is a big problem. Could be a problem unless Lando takes it really easy. Glad to say that Valtteri Bottas is fine, having been released from the medical centre after being winded in that incident. He's back in the Mercedes garage, we understand, Crofty.
Yeah, good to hear. Thank you, Ted. Meanwhile, Sergio Perez dips a couple of tyres onto the gravel at Rivazza. That won't help his progress much at all, as he finds himself now down in 14th place.
It's not out of the question, of course, Hamilton can be on the podium yet. With the pace he should have in that car and the tyres. You know, he's got 2 cars ahead of him in Ricciardo and Norris on the soft tyre McLaren have elected to go for. So Hamilton then on the charge.
He has halved the deficit between himself and Daniel Ricciardo in the space of 1 lap, as into the pits now comes Antonio Giovinazzi.
We have a problem on the brakes. We try to fix in pit stop position.
An adjustment made to the brakes at the right rear. I would imagine just taking off some blanking, a bit of cooling to stop the tyres overheating too much after the wet start, of course, that we had to start this race initially. And we saw the 2 Aston Martins having problems with their brakes and all blanket and cooling related there. So anyway, just to stop the brakes overheating, that's why they called Antonio Giovinazzi in. Verstappen out in front now by 4.5 seconds to Lando Norris. Norris's teammate Daniel Ricciardo starting to watch his wing mirrors a bit, I'd have thought.
Yeah, and even on the charge that Lewis is on, although he's starting to get a bit of dirty air now, Verstappen is still faster at this phase of the Grand Prix.
And the Red Bull looks a very fine machine this season, it really does. Now here comes Hamilton trying to get as far up the order as he possibly can. Wow. He's managed to clear Lance Stroll and he's managed to clear Daniel Ricciardo, and that looks a bit easier than the overtake on Lance Stroll, to be honest. The DRS working well for Mercedes, and the Mercedes power in the works team helping Hamilton up into 5th place, which was enjoyed by absolutely everybody in that picture except Valtteri Bottas, who didn't look best pleased because he sat in the garage and not out on the racetrack.
Well, you can see how easy it would be to throw the car off the road where the track's a little bit more damp, but with that kind of pace and overtaking under DRS, Lewis, it might still end up Verstappen versus Hamilton this Grand Prix. The safety car and the red flag, I should say, really brought Lewis back into contention,
absolutely.
didn't it?
Well, it gave him a lap as well. He managed to unlap himself in that red flag period, and that has certainly helped And by the way, looking forward to maybe some more of this season. Alonso against Vettel. And as Ted said earlier, 6 World Championships between them. Well, Sebastian Vettel is gaining on Fernando Alonso. And what he would dearly like is his first points as an Aston Martin driver as well. He's not that far, is he, at the moment, off the points places. Sorry, Martin.
Hamilton, another new fastest lap. He's flying along. He's got 3 seconds to catch up to Sainz. Oh, that's very wide there. Got away with it. Hamilton then a dozen seconds off the lead. 12.2 off the lead. Let's remember that.
And the way he's going, it'll take him just another couple of laps until he's within DRS zone attack range of Carlos Sainz. If it stays, by the way, Verstappen, Norris and Leclerc.
Lewis have got Norris up in P2 at the moment on a soft tyre. That should start to drop off. Going to push them all back to here.
That could well then be the target for Mercedes and for Lewis Hamilton. Is P2 available? What a salvage operation that would be for Mercedes and for Lewis Hamilton if they can get him up into second place. Where's Sebastian Vettel going? Don't want to go too much further to the right.
We were on board, weren't we, when he did that? Dropped the right rear into the gravel. Didn't upset it too much, did it? So really the key here for Lewis is the remainder of his race. Rather, how many adventures have they all had out there today, but is how quickly, and if indeed he can, clear the Ferraris.
Our battle forecast, powered by AWS, says striking distance in 4 laps between Hamilton and Sainz, just 4/10 taken out of Sainz's advantage by Hamilton on that previous lap. And if the top 3 can stay the top 3 to the checkered flag here, we would have the youngest podium average age in Formula One history. Be a fairly young average age with Martin Brundle talking to the top 3 down in Parc Fermé as well.
I am.
Be 22 years and 307 days, and with your inclusion, 24 years and 6 days.
Well,
something like that.
Yes, and in Parc Fermé, I will double the age of the just about of the podium sitters then. But we're not there yet. We haven't got the final podium, of course.
No, we certainly haven't. Hamilton on the charge through Acqua Minerale, a much drier line now than there was an hour or so ago. A race that started very damp, very tricky conditions and has continued to be testing for each of the drivers throughout the 43 laps that we've completed so far. We're on lap 45 for our race leader, Max Verstappen, whose advantage over Lando Norris grows lap after lap after lap. 7.5 seconds. Norris will start to form a bit of a train behind him now.
And Sainz has been quicker than Leclerc the last 2 laps.
Yuki, we need to respect turn 9 track limit. Imperative.
Twice he's had a time deleted for track limits. You don't want to do it again because then you start to get black and white flags and it could really start to cost you. On board with Perez, we can see Sebastian Vettel dipping another rear right tyre into the gravel. Perez was running in the top 4 at the restart, down to 13th, but he's going to try and get past Vettel here. Not quite into the chicane. They go. Vettel stays ahead as he tries to chase after Fernando Alonso himself. Right, Ted, to you.
Vettel's struggling with the same gear sync problems, or the lack of sync, as Lance Stroll. So it's another problem that's affecting both Aston Martins at the same time. Stroll is dealing really well with his, you have to say. He's keeping Kimi Räikkönen behind him by a couple of seconds. But yeah, isn't Kimi doing well? P8. Unfortunately for his teammate Giovinazzi, that's put him down that phantom pit stop to remove what looked like a brake blanking, or maybe another plastic bag that's made its way onto a rear brake duct, put him down to 15th. But Kimi running well in the points for Alfa Romeo.
Yeah, who didn't have a top 8 finish in 2020 and have Kimi in the top 8 as it stands at the moment, with Pierre Gasly right behind him and less than a second behind him at the moment. And Yuki Tsunoda, Martin, has been shown a black and white flag for not respecting track limits.
Yeah. He's made his start on the list. In these cars, that's no longer an overtaking place, I'm afraid, because the braking distance is too short. But he was just sort of having a look, really. He was just trying to menace Vettel off the road there. But Verstappen's checked out, hasn't he, up front? And now Hamilton is 12.9 seconds off the lead. So Verstappen is nicely covered up front. But Norris, Leclerc, Sainz and Hamilton covered by 4 seconds.
Yeah, Hamilton's not making the impression that I think he would have wanted to on Carlos Sainz at the moment. Down to about 1.4 seconds, but would dearly like to bring that under a second to get the advantage then of DRS. By the way, Pierre Gasly got ahead of Kimi Räikkönen. Ted was talking about Räikkönen. He was in the top 8, but no, Gasly, who was on the wrong tyres at the start of this race and went backwards faster than he was going forwards, is starting to move back up the timing charts once again. He was well out of the points at one stage in this race, but 8th might be a decent return for him as we continue to ride with Sergio Perez. Closest battle on the track, this one at the moment. Perez just for one brief second getting on the damp stuff into the Villeneuve chicane. He could have been challenging Charles Leclerc ahead of him at the moment, not Sebastian Vettel.
Yeah, it's not been a stellar race for Sergio Perez, is it? Having started on the front row of the grid, he's made rather too many mistakes.
Meanwhile, Charles Leclerc is within DRS range of Lando Norris. Sergio Perez has definitely got DRS. He's going to try and go the long way round Sebastian Vettel. Into the Tamburello chicane we go. That gets bumpy.
It was never going to make the apex, was it?
No.
In a month of Sundays.
Wise old head on Sebastian Vettel's shoulders, knew exactly what was coming up there and knew that he'd be able to snatch the place back again as well.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know. I guess if you've driven these things like so many of us have, you're just sitting like, it's not going to go in the corner from there. But he had to swap sides, didn't he? So
that gets very bumpy when you run over those yellow curbs.
But and they actually rubbed tyres. Look.
Yeah. A thorough examination given for both man and machine.
It's lucky that Perez wasn't on his roof there, actually.
Yeah.
With the tyres intertwined like that.
You don't want to see cars get launched, that is for sure. I noticed that Charles Leclerc was getting a bit closer to Lando Norris. I said a couple of laps ago, Norris might start to create a bit of a train here. If he is creating a bit of a train, that's going to help out Lewis Hamilton as well, who will be arriving the rear carriage of that train in a couple of laps' time and ready to strike.
But I agree with you. Lewis hasn't really closed into the back of the Ferraris quite as quickly as I thought he would.
No, Perez has finally got past Sebastian Vettel. 12th place is now his. So let's look at this battle here. Lando Norris, whose highest finish in a Grand Prix is 3rd. Charles Leclerc, race winner, and took delivery of the Ferrari that gave him his first race win last week, didn't he? The one that won for him at Spa a couple of years ago, and that's now sat in an underground car park in Monaco, and it's all his. How they get a Ferrari into an underground car park in Monaco, I'm not quite sure. F1 car, that is. There's a lot of other Ferraris and underground car parks in Monaco. Then comes Carlos Sainz, and now Hamilton with DRS.
Yeah. Rear wing open. Can he do it first time? But I don't think Carlos will be yielding that one. Oh, Lewis then struggling, flailing around on the steering wheel, picking up the slide, and it's cost them both a little bit of time there. But Sainz, having had, well, he was swearing at himself earlier on, was he, saying, how many mistakes am I going to make today? But one way and another, he's now got himself back into a nice position.
Yeah, he still might end up in the top 4. You never know. You need, so say the clever people, about a 1.3 second pace advantage to get an overtake done without DRS here. Hamilton did have DRS and still wasn't quite far up the road to make an overtake stick. We'll come back for more on the next lap.
Yeah, Lewis knew he needed to bail on that one.
I wonder, though, if that lap he might have used just a bit more of the energy recovery system, Lewis Hamilton. Might he need a couple of laps just to recharge the battery? It looks like it a little bit on the timings.
Yeah, that's the gap to Leclerc, isn't it, rather than Sainz. So has he got DRS? I think Lewis has again, hasn't he? Look, side by side.
Through goes Leclerc, and ahead goes Hamilton. Yeah, so he didn't need another lap to charge the battery, and he has got ahead of Carlos Sainz. And that's, job done at the second time of asking, and he's now up into the top 4.
Yeah, And Leclerc, of course, is in DRS, or occasionally anyway, on Lando Norris.
This is how Hamilton managed to get past Carlos Sainz then.
Yeah, it's a bit too powerful today, isn't it, that DRS?
Happy with that, Lewis. Let's get after it, mate.
Now the Ferrari, it's not the fastest in a straight line. They've recovered some of the horsepower that they lost last season, but not as much, I think, as they would have wanted to.
Yeah, so to explain what I was talking about, so of course, because Leclerc's quite close to the back of Lando Norris, he's also getting the DRS there. It won't be such an easy move for Lewis, accepting...
Getting quite a few vibrations, I don't know what from.
Except that Leclerc, is he within a second or not? We're about to find out.
Well, he is.
Be critical.
He is by just a couple of hundredths. He's within DRS.
And Lewis hasn't on this occasion. He didn't quite get within a second of the Ferrari.
He's going to need to make that up through the corners just a little bit. So vibrations for Lando Norris, that's concerning him. And at the moment, he's on course for his highest ever finish in a Formula One Grand Prix. Charles Leclerc looking to give Ferrari their first podium finish since the 4th race of last season. Remember the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, which Leclerc came home in 3rd place. Well, that was Charles Leclerc that day.
So Lewis, having filled up his battery, can go on the attack again. And when you see the car there, you see the red lights flashing, that's when they're harvesting electrical energy, as it's called. Obviously, when you're off throttle, and that's helping slow the car down as well.
I'll totally take back the last Ferrari podium finish. Because, of course, Sebastian Vettel was on the podium in Turkey, wasn't he? And that great squabble right at the end of that race as well. Leclerc's last podium was before that. So let's see what happens down the straight on this particular occasion. Norris and Leclerc in DRS range. Hamilton has DRS as his wing opens wide, and you can see the difference that's making, but not making enough to get past Charles Leclerc on this occasion.
Yeah, it's critical for Leclerc now to stay within DRS range, within 1 second of Norris. Otherwise, he's going to lose that place to the charging Hamilton.
Let's head to you, Ted.
Yeah, just looking at the McLaren pit wall from the terrace here. A few feet starting to twitch, a bit of nervous times. I think they did play a bit of a blinder, actually, putting that soft tyre on, because they knew it's hard to overtake round here, but they knew that if you have the early advantage of a softer tyre, you could get the Ferrari as Lando did, and then make the Ferrari do the hard work, try to overtake him towards the end, which is now happening. They're not worried about Hamilton. If he passes them, that's fine. They just want to stay ahead of the Ferrari.
Yuki Tsunoda ahead of the former Ferrari driver Sebastian Vettel, up into 13th. Other than that, places remaining pretty much as they are, but you expect that at Imola. Max Verstappen now nearly 15 seconds out in front. What an advantage Max Verstappen has. They almost feel that he could turn the engine off on the last lap, going down into Rivazza and still come home out in front. Such is that advantage that he's got.
Red Bull will be nervous of a safety car, though, that could just make that gap evaporate. It's a really good squabble going on.
Hamilton's a bit closer to Leclerc. He's a bit closer to Leclerc. He's not close enough to Charles Leclerc. Got to try and find a way to exit Rivazza just that little bit closer to the Ferrari.
Yeah. Leclerc, as I say, every time he stays in within a second of the car in front, Lando Norris, he'll have that defense mechanism. He can use his battery defensively as well. It's about 160 horsepower, the equivalent of the battery power. But there's a really good fight going on. Raikkonen, Ocon, Alonso, Perez as well for 9, 10, 11 and 12.
Perez could yet find himself in the points. He's not far behind Fernando Alonso, who's Martin mentioned, not far behind his teammate Esteban Ocon, who's not hugely far behind Kimi Raikkonen either. Either two of those 4 drivers could end up in the points. Now, the Ferrari has been impressive through the slower speed corners here at Imola this weekend. It's slower speed corners we're getting to now, Rivazza 1 and Rivazza 2. There's not much braking distance, as you said there, Martin, for Hamilton to try and close up under braking, but is he close enough now when we get to the DRS zone to try and get past the Ferrari?
Lewis had to. He's obviously sliding a bit in the slipstream. He had to snatch another gear down in Rivazza 2.
Here he comes then, Lewis Hamilton. He's just going to run out, though, of straight. before that chicane. And at the moment, Charles Leclerc doing a comfortable enough job, if you could ever be comfortable with a 7-time world champion chasing you at 190 miles an hour, doing a comfortable enough job of holding off.
And I think it's helping Lando Norris as well, isn't it, in terms of...
Make sure he has blue flags, the guy ahead.
He's not overly happy with the back markers not getting out of the way before, but this time it's Nikita Mazepin who is that back marker. He just wants, like, guys, just tell him not to get in my way. I don't want anything. Don't want anything to affect me.
Yeah, they do have an internal communication with race control.
Yep.
He's basically saying to his team, his pit wall, like, remind them, blue flags. But once again, then, look at that. You have to say, Leclerc looks a little bit more than a second behind now, doesn't he?
He does. And I think, you know, without DRS for Leclerc, that obviously will help Lewis Hamilton. Let's see as we get to the line who's got the DRS this time. And it is not Charles Leclerc, and it is Lewis Hamilton. And is this what Hamilton needs to blast past that Ferrari? It very much is what he needed to blast past that Ferrari. Lewis Hamilton is back up into the podium places. He was a lap down. He was in 9th place. The red flag that came out when his teammate Valtteri Bottas collided with George Russell caused the race to be suspended. Hamilton could unlap himself, and now on lap 55, he's back up into the podium places.
Raikkonen's going to be investigated after the race for an infringement behind the safety car as we watch. Yeah, as soon as Leclerc didn't have his rear wing open, he was a sitting duck, wasn't he?
This is awesome work, Lewis. Come on. Got Norris ahead, P2.
And that was very much the target. That the minute that Bono said, Lewis, Lando Norris on the soft compound tyre could be struggling at the end, you knew that was Mercedes' target in this race. Verstappen a very long way ahead as Yuki Tsunoda picks up then that 5-second penalty for exceeding track limits. He's already been shown the black and white flag. He hasn't managed to keep within the track limits, and he'll get 5 seconds added to his time at the end. Won't affect his position the way it stands at the moment. Right, 1 second, the battle between Norris and Hamilton, which means no DRS for Hamilton on this straight.
What if Lando Norris is going to get past, if he's going to get past by the Ferrari, which by the Mercedes of Hamilton, it's highly likely. What you've got to make sure he does is not lose too much time in it. It's a tough call for him now. He's a racer, he'll fight for everything. But what he doesn't need is a scuffle to go with it, because he's still got a great chance of a podium.
Well, even if Lewis Hamilton manages to get past him, as you rightly say, he's got a buffer between himself and Leclerc. And you're right, you're never going to accept, Martin, someone taking second place. You just give him second place.
Absolutely, yeah, he won't be doing that. I think it's just when the inevitable happens, you know, if he gets in his DRS, when the inevitable presents itself, he needs to keep it clean if it's going to, if Lewis is going to get past him, and then he's still got a great shout of a podium.
It's like, don't lose time in a chicane trying to fight the position when you're not going to...
Or your front wing.
Yeah. Hamilton might be a little too far back on this occasion to make the move down the straight, but let's ride on board with him. Max Verstappen now over 18 seconds out in front. You can see the difference that the DRS makes, and Hamilton did have, for one brief moment, a little thought in his mind that he could go for it, but safety, the order of the day, because next time around he'll be that much closer to Norris and should be able to make the pass.
Yeah, the closing speed was extraordinary, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Ted, to you.
Yeah, it's traction. Lando's saying that his rear tyres are gone, and it's traction out of the corners that looks like he's losing the time to Hamilton. Of course, it's the constructors' fight that McLaren are going to have, or expecting to have, with Ferrari. That's why they want to keep the Ferraris behind them especially, and they're expecting, kind of constructors-wise, Mercedes to be ahead of them towards the end of the season. That's why they're so keen to keep the Ferraris behind, and they might have to accept giving this place to Hamilton eventually.
Yeah. If Hamilton and Norris, by the way, do end up on the podium in either order, that'll be exactly 700 podium finishes for British drivers in Formula One history. So the race after Hamilton becomes the 300th or provides the 300th win for a British driver in Formula One, well, these two could make up 699 and 700 podium finishes here this afternoon. So here comes Hamilton once again with that closing speed, and already the DRS making a huge difference, and he's now going to have to go the long way round as Norris puts that McLaren in a very nice position indeed.
He did. Parked it right in the middle of the track. Very nice. And the McLaren's had tremendous straight line speed all through the event, and that's paying some dividends at the moment. And young Lando very much keeping his head under extreme pressure. Impressive.
Big season for Lando Norris. New teammate, but now his 3rd season in Formula One, more experience under his belt. I'm not saying he's done much wrong in his first 2 seasons. He hasn't, but he's beginning to look more and more impressive for me. Super in qualifying yesterday, but sadly went as wide as Pierre Gasly did, not at that corner, but at Piratella, and he got his lap time deleted. Could have qualified 3rd, but has put up a very good race here today, and there's a bumpy old ride for Gasly. He's lost places as a result of that. No, 8th place for Pierre Gasly still.
Ambition well ahead of adhesion there.
Just a touch. Right, what's Hamilton's ambition? See how the gap closes to about 0.3 of a second when they get to the chicane, and by the time they start this straight, because it's so difficult to follow for the rest of the lap so closely, it's about 0.8 of a second. He's coming.
Lando looking in his mirrors.
Yeah, which way is he going to go this time? Norris does exactly what he did the lap before. It worked well then, so why change the habit?
Park it in the middle. He's not weaving about. Good driving.
Absolutely. But it's difficult to pick another overtaking spot on this track. But is there anywhere that Hamilton could pick, I wonder?
It's letting the Ferraris come back at them a bit.
Oh, clutch slip in the middle of corners. And the corner throttle, it just doesn't, no drive.
Oh dear. So to add to his problems, he's got technical heebie-jeebies as well. Hamilton certainly a bit closer so far on this lap, but he needs to try and keep it, if he can, somewhere under 0.7 of a second at the start of the straight.
Lando, you're knocking the paddle, the left paddle.
What's that, shaking the nerves?
Yeah, no, yeah, obviously he's wherever he's got his hands behind the wheel ready for the shifts, he's just touching the clutch paddle a little bit.
So don't do that and you'll be fine, I think is the message. Right, is Hamilton this time around close enough? And he does look to be an awful lot closer. And once again, Norris makes him go the long way round, but Hamilton was close enough, under braking to get alongside and ahead. And he does move himself up into 2nd place. It's Verstappen from Hamilton. The charge from Hamilton is taking him to the runners-up place.
It seemed a bit inevitable, didn't it? Once he got his eye in and stayed close enough through the 2 Rivazzas, and that has allowed Ferrari to come at the McLaren a little bit.
We keep our fingers crossed from a British perspective that Lando Norris manages to hang on to that 3rd place. Yeah, he was just a fraction of a second closer at the start of the straight, and it made all the difference.
Yeah, he's picked up the slipstream as well.
He's too quick for me.
See the over the bumps, the front wing vibrating there as well. Talking of over the bumps, skipping lightly over the bumps, Max Verstappen, who's never led the World Championship during his Formula One career. Well, today he has got the chance to draw level with Lewis Hamilton.
And he's got the single point for fastest. No, he hasn't. Hamilton's got it back. Hamilton's got the fastest lap now with a 16.7. So he would be the man leading the World Championship.
Hamilton would, yes, because of that extra point. So he's got the chance to draw level, but with the fastest lap for Hamilton at the moment, that, as Martin says, gives him 1 extra point.
And 3 laps remaining. That is fastest lap. Nice work, Lewis.
The fastest lap helped, of course, by that DRS assistance and the charge to get past Lando Norris, who will move up into 3rd place in the Drivers' Championship, as you can see. And at the moment, it's Verstappen, Hamilton and Norris in the top three. Leclerc, Sainz, Ricciardo, Stroll, Gasly, Raikkonen and Ocon completing the points positions. Alonso chasing down Ocon for that final points place here today, and not much between the two Alpines. Anthony Davidson, there's been a bit of a gulf between Max Verstappen and the rest though this afternoon. Throughout it all, he has reigned supreme.
Yep. He's been in an absolute class of his own today. Hasn't put a foot wrong. And the car has looked brilliant to drive as well. Yellow flag in sector 2.
So
see Mazepin is around that area.
Yeah, someone's had a bit of a moment, I think.
See him dropping back on the driver tracker.
The entry to either the exit of Piratella or the entry to Aqua Minerale. Either way, I don't think Verstappen's going to care too much about that.
Well, no, it looks like he's got going again now anyway. But yeah, I mean, Max has been sublime today. He's driven so well, so clean. The start was just perfect. And yeah, since then, he hasn't looked back.
We talked about it a lot, didn't we? You know, on a track that's difficult to overtake. There he is. Aqua Minerale.
Knew you wouldn't let us down.
Have a glass of water. Nikita Mazepin and another spin. Ted.
So if Lando Norris's teammate, Lando Norris is doing well, holding back for as long as he did Lewis Hamilton, and now the Ferraris again. His teammate, Australian Daniel Ricciardo, is having to do the same to Lance Stroll and Pierre Gasly. Gasly's been on the radio.
Sebastian, you need to retire the car in the garage, so box. The gearbox is getting worse, so just try to minimise your shifts and box.
Yeah, Sebi with the pink helmet just comes in front of me. And Lance Stroll dealing with that gearbox problem. I don't know whether he feels he could overtake Ricciardo, but those soft tyres starting to go off on Ricciardo's McLaren as well. Gasly feels he has extra pace if only he'd get past Stroll and Ricciardo, but he can't.
But he can't at the moment, and Stroll hanging on to that 7th place, which I think would be a decent return. Another afternoon of struggles for the Aston Martin team. Out in front, though, Max Verstappen. And Verstappen at the moment coming to Piratella for one last time in this race. Whilst the gap at the top of the Drivers' Championship will just be 1 point, the gap on track here, and remember we had to resume after a red flag, has been an awful lot wider. It's a very fine Red Bull car. It's a very fine driver at the wheel of that Red Bull car, and Verstappen and Hamilton is the battle that we are expecting to see race after race after race throughout the course of this season. In Bahrain, it was Hamilton who took the honours. Today, he's going to finish as runner-up to a man who's never won in Italy before, who DNF'd in all 3 races in Italy last year, and who wins the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix this afternoon. Max Verstappen, for the first time in his career, takes victory in Italy, and it was a victory by a long, long margin.
Just a brilliant drive, and yeah, never headed after that turn 2 and 3 with that fight with Hamilton. He made hard work of it today, but I feel ended up where he really should have, if all things had been fair.
Well, he finishes as runner-up. Big smiles down at McLaren as Lando Norris takes another podium in Formula One. A super drive from him this afternoon. I think Ferrari are going to be massively happy with a 4th and a 5th place as well for Leclerc and Sainz.
Okay, Max, great work. There you go. It's not always all about a Saturday. Nice job.
Yes! Well, that was tricky out there, but great job, guys. You managed that really well. Thank you.
Mega job, Max. Mega job. Great, difficult afternoon, but you nailed it. Well done.
Yeah, I'm very happy with that.
They really are some of the hardest conditions a driver can ever face in their career. And driving on slicks in a drying circuit, that narrow band you have, I mean, hats off to all of them. Such incredible hard driving. But Lando Norris, got to say, I was just going to say driver of the day. I'm so glad that he is the driver of the day. To do what he did on those soft tyres at the end as well, they should have been going off way more than that to fend off the 2 Ferraris.
That's P3. P3. Great job, mate. Well done. P3.
Yeah, let's go. Awesome.
Well, he's the man that should have been P3 in qualifying had he not had his lap time deleted for track limits yesterday. And as was told to Max Verstappen, it's not all about Saturdays.
No, it's not, and it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. And I was fearful that it would have been around this track that's so hard to overtake on. But we did see overtaking today. I'm glad we did.
Oh, we have brilliant conditions to watch the Grand Prix today, as you say. Damp track that starts drying, as well as I mentioned, Ferrari 4th and 5th, Leclerc and Sainz. Super day for McLaren as Ricciardo comes home 6th, ahead of Lance Stroll in 7th, Pierre Gasly, Kimi Raikkonen in 9th, but...
Nice work, Lewis. That is an awesome recovery. Great battle back to B2.
Lewis, super drive. We're leading the championship.
Awesome job, guys. My apologies for that mistake earlier on, but we live and we learn. On to the next one.
Indeed, mate, indeed.
Yeah, for a long period, it looked like Mercedes' reign at the top of the championships that have been going on since Germany 2018 was going to come to an end. Verstappen has got to within 1 point in the Drivers' Championship with this victory today. I mentioned Kimi Raikkonen finishing 9th, matching his best scores of last year. He's going to be investigated after the race for a procedure infringement at the rolling start. So something happened at the rolling start that wasn't picked up, but the stewards have had a look at it. Maybe he was ahead of a car before they got over the line. We'll have a look at that in our debrief after the race with Simon and Damon and Martin. Behind Kimi Raikkonen, Esteban Ocon finishes 10th to claim his first points of the season, ahead of his teammate Fernando Alonso, who's still waiting for his on his return. Perez. Bad day for Perez, 12th fastest in the other Red Bull, ahead of Tsunoda, who had a few adventures of his own, quite frankly. Giovinazzi was 14th, ahead of Sebastian Vettel, who retired, Mick Schumacher and Nikita Mazepin, who were 2 laps down, and Bottas, Russell and Latifi, who will have their own thoughts, and I'm very keen to hear them after this race, especially Bottas and Russell. For the time being, though, smiles for Max Verstappen, and I'm sure a big smile of relief for Lewis Hamilton, because this could have been a very bad day for him.
When he was parked up in turn 7 at Tosa, I'm sure he didn't think at that moment he'd be finishing this race in P2. Great scenes down there, though. Brilliant drive from Lando Norris, and it was great to see the McLaren team engaged and so happy as well, sharing that moment.
Well, yesterday Lando was tweeting, you know, as to how annoyed with himself that he was after running wide and getting that lap time deleted, and Hamilton was there on social media to say, look, don't beat yourself up. These things happen, and you can get over it with a decent result tomorrow.
And he played it hard but fair with Lewis, I reckon, at the end there. You know, he could have made his car a bit wider, but then, as we saw before with George and Valtteri, how dangerous it can be if you start playing games going into that first chicane. And I think it was very respectful but hard at the same time. He really didn't want to give up that P2. Must have been hard to admit that Lewis was just a bit faster at that stage in the race, but wow, to hang on to those soft tyres like he did, incredible stuff.
And a podium for McLaren then on the day that Pato O'Ward will start on pole in Birmingham in the IndyCar race for McLaren. In their IndyCar race, which you can see, of course, on Sky Sports F1. And good luck to Romain Grosjean on his IndyCar debut as well. Happy birthday for yesterday. He starts 7th in that race. Rather looking forward to watching that after we go off air here at Imola, where I think long after we go off air, Lando Norris will still be smiling. But let's hear from Martin Brundle with our race winner.
Congratulations, Max. That was a wild afternoon, but you had it covered. A great victory.
Yeah, it was very challenging out there, especially in the beginning. It was very hard to stay on track, to be honest. It was very slippery. And then, of course, with the tires degrading in the wet, and then choose the right moment to go into slicks is never easy. So I think we managed everything well. Then, yeah, a little moment in my restart.
Yeah, that was so close.
But yeah, and everything else went really well today, so of course very happy with that.
What happened on the restart just before the after the pit flag? Just trying to warm the tyres?
Yeah, a little moment when I was just trying to warm it with throttle, but yeah, luckily we didn't spin.
But you had a wonderful run down to the first corner and the original start to take the lead.
Yeah, I was surprised myself. I mean, last year we've been struggling a little bit off the line, but I think we worked really hard to make that better. And already, of course, you saw it in Bahrain, but now in these tricky conditions, I think we did a great job.
Well done. Lewis just took the fastest lap towards the end, so he's still a point ahead of you in the World Championship, but you're right back in there.
Yeah, but it's a long season.
Absolutely.
So we have to stay calm.
Congratulations. Stay calm indeed. Wow, Lewis, where do we start on that race? I mean, congratulations for bringing it back in second place.
Thank you. Well, first, congratulations to Max. He did a fantastic job today, and just solid work from him, and also to Lando. You know, what an awesome job, and so great to see McLaren back up there. Yeah, on my side, it was not the greatest of days. It's the first time I've made a mistake in a long time, but I'm grateful I was able to bring the car home still.
Well, take us through that little error at Tosa. You were passing some lapped cars.
Yeah, so there was only one dry line, and I guess in a bit too much of a hurry to get by everyone, and I came onto the inside and I could see it was wet, and I was trying to stop, but the thing wouldn't stop and sent me off. And a bit unfortunate, but I'm really, really grateful that we got to get going again, and that's, to get some points for the team was really important today.
So during the red flag break, did you ever imagine you'd actually still be leading the World Championship and you'd finish second?
I wasn't thinking about it. I was just trying to get over the gutting kind of feeling it is when you make a mistake, and just moving on from it and just learning from it real quick, and you don't have time to dwell on it, so that's what I did. Get back into racing spirit, and yeah, I didn't know whether or not we'd be able to overtake, because again offline was going to be wet, but still had some really good fun battles with all the guys.
Great race, great drive, thank you. Lando on the podium again, second time. Whoa, that was you were really having to defend hard, but your pace was so strong.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm happy. I think a nice recovery after yesterday. It was a long race, a tough one, but I didn't start so well. It was a tough start, but I came back through. I had good pace. I tried hanging on to second, but Lewis was a bit too quick for me today. So yeah, it's nice to be fighting these guys. It's nice to be there on merit and there on pure pace, and hopefully we can have some more in the future.
Yeah, well, you were with Lewis in your mirrors. You kept your head. There's a lot of pressure there, and you were talking about a bit of clutch slip, but you were managing a few things.
Yeah, that was just my knee pad was hitting my clutch pedal, so it was my own mistake. But yeah, we opted to go on the softs for the restart, and I had good pace in the first 10-15 laps, but I knew I was going to struggle a lot towards the end, especially with Lewis behind me. It was not going to be an easy one, but I tried. I held on for 2 or 3 or 4 laps, but in the end, I just couldn't hang on. But I'm happy with third. I'm not disappointed.
Well, the fans appreciated it. They voted you driver of the day.
They did?
They indeed.
I didn't think I had any fans, but thank you very much.
Of course you do. Thanks, Lando.
Cheers.
I'm sure he's got a couple. You're a fan.
Yeah, absolutely. No, he's funny, isn't he? But you can see he's chuffed with the job he did today, and he should be.
Absolutely. Max Verstappen, race winner today, though, as you heard with Martin Brundle. I think he's very chuffed with today's performance, and he had such a comfortable margin at the end here.
And I'm wrong, aren't I? He did put a foot wrong when he almost spun when he was in at the restart. So I mean, not even the best out there had a trouble-free day. So yeah, it really goes to show how tricky these conditions were for
when they were racing.
Today.
He never put a foot wrong.
Exactly. Yeah, under racing conditions.
Under racing conditions. Looking ahead, though, to what I think is going to continue to be a magnificent championship tussle this year between the two teams, between Verstappen and Hamilton. We are so set up, and I now can't wait for Portugal for the next race as well.
I worried coming here that it'd just be Red Bull domination. We wouldn't see the Mercedes, and it'd be a boring race. The fact that it was still close here in qualifying and in the race means that we're surely now we can say we're set for a great season between these two teams.
Well, let's certainly hope so, because as the days go on, I'm sure Mercedes find ways to make up the deficits in development. Red Bull will have to find ways to make their advantage count today. Lando Norris is going to have to find ways to celebrate the 699th podium by a British driver, and alongside him Lewis Hamilton, the 700th podium visit by a British driver. If they're going to go out and celebrate for a meal, well, they might need to go Dutch, because it's Holland on top, though, with Max Verstappen winning today. Another career victory for Max Verstappen, number 11 in his Formula One career. So once upon a time, Max Verstappen would have woke up ahead of a race in Italy and thought, no, I don't really fancy this much today. Last year, 3 DNFs when he came to this country. Before then, 12th, 7th, 10th, 5th, 8th, and now 1st for Max Verstappen.
Well, in a way, I'm glad, Crofty, because you were telling me during free practice 1 how he was never going to be successful in Italy and how the stats reign supreme, and there you go.
So he's conquered.
You can put your stats somewhere else.
He's conquered the grid and he's conquered the stats today, and he gets a lightning bolt trophy for his troubles as well. We had the financial director at Red Bull to pick up the constructors trophy as well, and first time we've had 2 Brits on a podium since China 2012, when Jenson Button and Lewis Hamilton were on the podium that day. What a race, what a season in prospect. This is turning into something special, I think. Certainly for Max Verstappen. Great recovery drive from Lewis Hamilton. Wonderful drive from Lando Norris to make amends after his disappointment in qualifying yesterday. And a victorious drive from Max Verstappen. Surely not the last we'll see this year. Hamilton leads the championship by 1 point. Let's bring on round 3. I can't wait for that.
Got damage. He pushed me right wide in turn 1.
Daniel, we want to swap positions.
What the f was he doing?
Yes! Mega job, Max. Mega job.